What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favalli coming at you with the one, the only, my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. Everyone knows what time it is, except for everyone who's not me and Grant. It's Commissioner for a Day time in the NBA. We have some of our own, but we asked for rule changes from our Discord members and some of our followers. We were inundated with responses. So thank you for all your submissions. We're clearly not going to get to every single one because there was it was like 100 of them, Grant, I think it came out to. So that was really cool. But the pretense of this podcast is you are commissioner for a day and you can just give executive orders to do literally anything that you want. So there'll be no pushback, no process that goes through. So we have a bunch. Grant and I will respond to them while proposing a couple of our own. But first and foremost, Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you?
I'm drunk with power, Dan. I feel it just coursing through my veins. I never knew I needed to be in a powerful position like this until I feel it for today. So hopefully we don't abuse it, and hopefully it does not corrupt us. But I'm excited about just deciding how the NBA should operate.
Yeah, I mean, like these are all ours are right. Although it is always fun where I had a cut. Like you and I I asked for a few from us, and we each have two in here just because we have so many responses and some of which like step on the toes of other things that we would have come up with anyway. Anything, notes or thoughts on this exercise before we sort of dive into it? Honestly, by the way, nothing personal here. If we think an idea is terrible, we don't think you're a terrible human being for proposing it. So let's get that out of the way.
Your idea is just real dumb. That's all. I mean, I think what I did notice, and like this won't be a surprise because I feel like this has come through when we've had like state of the game conversations before. But generally speaking, I think the NBA product is really awesome right now. I think it's really good. And like I have some notes, but it's harder now to do this than it would have been like a few years ago. I think because generally what you'll see is like a lot of mine go to like the viewing experience as opposed to like the game itself. So yeah, that's kind of where I had to go just because I do think the game is being played really great right now.
I'm mostly in the same camp. I found myself like when I was thinking about it, there was nothing like I either wanted to focus on like actual dumb or funny shit, which I didn't include, or it was okay, this is sort of maybe it's not granular, but it'll have a mild impact. I wasn't looking to overhaul the way that the game is played right now. So I was like, you are pretty content with how the product is right now. From some of the submissions that we received, though, it's very clear that not everyone shares that thought, which always makes for hopefully good discussion. But well, what do you say we find out, Grant?
Let's see.
Our first one is from Dan, who might be me. I don't want to see any intentional fouls beyond the arc for teams up by 3 inside of a minute or something to play. If you do, it should either result in, I would say like an automatic 3 free throws. I've seen some people say that it should be a choice between that or 2, or we can go to that and say the team gets to choose between you get your 2 free throws or you get 1 free throw and the ball back immediately. I understand why teams foul up 3. I really do. I don't want to see it. Let's force them to play defense.
So this is the intention here is to disincentivize defenses in these specific situations from like making it so the trailing team can't get a 3 up to tie it, right? This is like the whole, right? That's what we're targeting here. The like, and some teams don't foul, by the way, like, because it seems like the math is just never settled on whether you should or shouldn't foul. I think you hear both sides of it. I like this rule. I like this proposal because it just is objectively more fun if a team that's up has to defend in like a high pressure situation and can't just like play the math game and rob us of a game tying 3 or you know what I mean? Like I don't feel like this wouldn't like fundamentally change the game. It would just make these isolated situations more fun. So you're 1 for 1 as far as I'm concerned.
I was trying to think about what the argument would be against it, and I guess you could say that it'd be difficult to define intent, because what if you're playing defense and like actually fouling? I still think that rule should apply because then it's just going to make the game more exciting, but you could make the case that let's say there's like I don't know, like 12 seconds left and you defend like really well for 8 of them, but then you foul because you're going for the ball. I could see like quibbling over that, but I still I would rather remove all of the opportunities for teams to foul up 3 than I would like, okay, if that happens, like, all right, that happens. And so deal with it. Maybe it's would you prefer it to be the automatic 3 free throws, like even if you're not in the shooting motion, or should it be you get a choice between? I think it should be maybe a choice between shooting 1 and getting the ball back, or the 3 free throws, because I just don't like at that point, like what is the like if you're just going to get 2 free throws anyway, why would you ever vote in favor of that scenario? Like, what would be the logic between saying we'll take 2 free throws? Is it because you think that you could make 1, miss 1, and get the rebound? I was struggling with that part of this.
I think if it was a straight 2 free throws, which is sort of what it is now, which we don't like, then it still is too easy of a decision if you're inclined to want to foul when you're up 3. I like the 1 free throw in the ball, because if you're the trailing team, you're not you're running very little time off. You're getting the point, you're getting the ball back out, and now you're down 2, assuming you make it. I mean, if you miss it, is that a live ball? And then, because that would be an interesting strategy too. Maybe it would change the strategy somewhat. I just think if you're any rule proposition, you have to think about like what are the potentials for like gaming it or abusing the rule. And you'd say like, well, the offensive players might really try to flop or like accentuate contact to try to get those 3 free throws. I think making it 1 in the ball, I like a little better. And I also don't, the potential for abuse is like, I mean, guys are going to accentuate contact in these situations anyway. So I don't really think you'd have some crazy issue with that. I think it's good. I like the 1 in the ball though, I don't think,
by the way, 1 in the ball, I think it would have to be sort of just like a technical foul situation where if you miss, it's a dead ball. Because if it was a live ball after that, that would be just bizarre.
Yeah, you almost should foul just because it's like, well, there's a 20% chance we just get the ball and we're still up 3. Like then the math would probably suggest you should foul.
I know it would matter or vary by player, but if it was actually a choice between 3 foul shots or 1 and then getting the ball back, there would be an actual decision there, right? Because anecdotally, if whenever I watch someone get 3 consecutive free throws, like in those situations, it always feels like they're going to miss 1.
For sure. It does. It really, I don't know. I wonder what the numbers are on that, but I feel exactly the same way. It's like, well, he's definitely not hitting all 3 of these. Like that's impossible, but
Our next one comes from you. Would you like to read it?
Yeah. So this is a viewing experience thing, really. So I would like to see a shot clock. I want to shorten free throw time full out. So like, this isn't just a shot at Giannis. It's just everybody. Like the guys can game the 10-second count by like, you see him put a hand up and like, don't throw me the ball yet, ref. I'm not ready. I have to do my 2 deep breaths. Then I get the ball. Then the clock starts, which nobody actually enforces anyway. Hard 8 seconds. Like you get fouled the second you step to the line, the ref throws. Like this isn't a rule as much as like a behavior thing. Like we got to get this thing started more quickly. So that's 8 seconds. And like, there's a visible clock ticking, like in baseball, they have the pitch clock now that the pitcher can see. Like just put it up, do 8 seconds on the shot clock, use the same thing. It's right there. He's looking at it anyway. Then, because I'm really they do this a little bit now. And I think I would be fine with an expansion of it. I want ads being run like, in a half screen or quarter screen picture-in-picture setup during free throws, because who's paying attention anyway? Like, and then the sort of trickle down of that is it allows you to cut. You're not hurting your advertisers. You can cut out commercial breaks, of a minute or 2 down the road in the game, like hopefully in the last few minutes. Because I really am driving at just, making the end of game not so herky-jerky stop and start. So this is like 3 rules in one, but I want free throws to be done faster. I want ads during free throws, and I want all that to pay off in like just a more streamlined late game experience.
I like this rule, but I think you undermined it in your justification by saying because who's paying attention anyway if those ads are running during free throws. And I think
you wouldn't say that to the advertisers. You have to gloss over that part of it.
It would be nice, and specifically, I don't know why I'm sure there's a reason, and I just haven't dug or cared to ask about it, but like the ESPN show versus the TNT show, forget about the quality of what you think of either of them. There's more time spent in studio with the TNT guys, and with ESPN, everything just feels like it's a minute and then there's more commercial breaks. So like if you were to shove more advertisements in during the free throws, would it allow or compel ESPN to expand the actual, in-game or studio analysis? Now, whether you want more of that, it's a separate matter, but in theory, having more time to break down the game, like rather than having to rush to these commercial breaks at halftime, pregame, postgame, all that.
Yeah, I think like to dump on my own rule, it's not necessarily a given that networks that are collecting ad dollars would say we'll keep that the bottom line number of ad dollars we're getting the same by pulling out commercials later in the game and making and breaking even by having free throw commercials. They might just be like, we'll do both. Like we should have ads on every free throw anyway, and we'll just keep the same like the commercial breaks like that. That presumes that the networks are like, well, we don't want to cap on how much ad revenue we can make, which is probably.
And then this will also all end with, you mentioned quarter screen, but the quarter screen will be the actual free throw attempt while the ads.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I feel like that kind of happens sometimes now where they'll have a quick like 10-second ad during the free throw, and somehow the audio is up on the ad, and so you're hearing the ad over the free throw. And then I feel like the picture sometimes does get really like what you're talking about, like I think actually happens sometimes.
It's also kind of like when they do those coming out of halftime updates on like the person covering the game in person, where it's okay. So sometimes the game is smaller than the actual interviewer, most of the time not. But I like this rule in theory. It just feels like it could open the door for the NBA would compromise, say, yeah, we're going to show more ads during free throws and keep the same amount of commercial breaks.
That's the problem.
So before we get to my next one, there were ones that were kind of tied to this, so they will be in between your next one. I'm not showing favoritism to anyone over you, except that I actually am. I just wanted to give you a heads up for there. My next one is, let's have officials emphasize calling more offensive fouls on the habitual users of the off arm to create separation or generate contact. And this is associated a lot with big guys, Sabonis, Şengün, even Jokic. We see it from smaller players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will do it. We just see it all the time. And it gets into freedom of movement stuff, which there is some specific things coming here, but this specifically is just, I just find it annoying because not only is it, okay, sometimes it's already called and sometimes it's not. So I want to see it being more of an emphasis, but also you kind of open the door for additional flopping, which doesn't feel as prevalent necessarily, or at least not as much of a point of an emphasis as it did previously. But like, because of this just proliferation of the off arm, you can have either actually be an offensive foul that's not like should be an offensive foul that's not called, or like I said, you're kind of paving the way for then slight contact can be exaggerated. And so I'd like to see, I'm all open to try and make things harder on offenses without shrinking the floor necessarily. And I think this is one of the freedom of movement aspects that I would like to see be called more.
I mean, this is something that's just kind of gotten away from officials, because it used to be, and the explanation you'll hear now from broadcasters and stuff is like, well, he didn't get the arm extended. Like when the arm gets extended in a push off by an offensive player, that one gets called pretty often. And as a result, players have just gotten really good at pushing off with like a bent arm. It's almost like a shoulder shrug, like Jason Tatum, SGA, like they're so good at it that you don't even see it half the time. Şengün is like, it's very obvious most of the time. I think like, I should have looked up the actual rule. Like, it doesn't feel like full extension of the arm should be a requirement for this to be an offensive foul, because the whole point is you're just like shoving someone and you happen to have the ball, so we're okay with it. It definitely has to change.
Argue that the elbow is more dangerous than fully extending.
Well, yeah, anyway, or at least like as effective, which is like, it works just as well. And if you can hide it better, then it's probably more effective than a full-on push. So yeah, this is one that it's like, I mean, would you agree that in terms of like how the game is actually played, this is like kind of new and pretty clearly a problem, like because it just is a foul?
What's interesting too is I remember watching a video, I think Monty McCutcheon on NBA.com was going through points of emphasis for, I want to say it might have been in 2022, like the coming season. And the off arm was like it was supposed to be called more in favor of the defender. Like those were going to be offensive fouls. And I mean, what is time? Like, I don't remember thinking that season that it was a problem.
Yeah.
And then like, we're only 2 or 3 years removed. And it does feel like it's just completely, and by the way, it gets called sometimes,
right?
But that's also part of the problem is there needs to be, if you're not going to make it an emphasis for, like, there needs to be some type of uniformity with it. I would just prefer for it to favor the defense at this point, where it's like you said, your arm doesn't need to be fully extended. And yeah, a lot of stuff's always going to be subjective, open to interpretation, but I think you could decide whether there's a consequential level of contact when someone's backing down or like going forward and trying to like push off, or because it's not even just a let me try and draw contact thing, or let me get like, it's associated with big guys, but it's like that's how Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, or like you mentioned Jason Tatum, like we've seen Jalen Brunson do it too, like can push off and create separation that way on the perimeter.
Yeah, it's a foul. And I think like it's the type of thing, this is not a good test to use for all situations like this, but like if it's a pickup game and you're defending someone and they do this, everyone's like, yeah, okay, well, what are we doing? Like that's not, you're not going to call that foul because we get made fun of, but it's like obviously a foul.
You want to take us through our next one?
Yeah. So this is from Patrick Fenelon. Says, I'd like to see the freedom of movement, in quotes, emphasis reversed so as to allow for more physical perimeter defense. This is one that like some version of this gets raised whenever it's like offense is out of control or look at these crazy numbers. And this, do you take this to be like bringing back hand checks, like full on like hand on the body type of thing, or just, or what do you think this means more specifically?
I mean, it probably, I would think it does refer to that. I think it might even incorporate the off arm stuff that we were just talking about. I would like, two of the other things is, I don't know if this will fall under that, but like the landing space for shooters where it's, that we've seen, okay, they've called more of those offensive fouls, especially from threes, if there's a leg kick out or an unnatural motion there. But I feel like, and not to, he's injured and he plays for my favorite team, not to single him out, but like some of the spread eagle attempts from Jalen Brunson, like that when you're in the lane, that stuff I feel like doesn't get called as much. And the other thing, doesn't it feel like, and I don't know how far back we'd have to go, but like the off ball stuff where it's like you get in the way of someone who's trying to run to the corner, where it's like a defense setting a screen almost. I'm not saying you should be allowed to bear hug them, but if you're going to derail their path of motion, if they're trying to relocate to a corner or something, I've seen too many of those calls over the past couple of years, like being called the defensive foul. And it's just, maybe that's not an offensive foul, but it certainly to me shouldn't be a defensive foul.
Well, so then let's think about the effects of this, because I'm open to it, because it is really like, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if when I'm watching games, am I thinking like, man, these offensive players are allowed to like move around too much. Like, so if you're going to curtail drives, I would assume, right? Like and maybe that will, because it's just going to be harder to get around somebody in a one-on-one situation if they can kind of hold you. Probably harder to get open off the ball if more physicality is allowed. So like it definitely reduces scoring and slows the game down, probably. Maybe emphasizes post play again. I don't know. It's hard to guess at anything effect wise other than I think it would knock scoring down. Like that seems like pretty clear.
I think it would definitely make the game more physical. I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, we have all these stars injured, so maybe that is a terrible thing. I don't like, do you actually think that it would result in more? I mean, like one of the screenshot post, like one of the things they used to emphasize is kind of if a defender's getting under someone in the post, like where, like with Al Horford in this picture, no one could see it unless they're on YouTube, where he positions his leg, like they could call stuff like that sometimes. I can't imagine, there's intended and unintended consequences for everything. I can't imagine that it would re-emphasize post play though.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking like, well, if the perimeter game and driving and getting clean looks is just harder, maybe you're like, well, we'll try something else. And then that is, as a result, that's where we just dump it into the post more. I don't know. I can't decide if I think the level of physicality allowed on the perimeter is a problem or not. And that's kind of a tough threshold issue to get over for me. I lean no.
Do you think there was a happy medium 2 years ago when they did make the point of emphasis on some of this stuff where it wasn't full bore into it, but it did feel like that? Or did you find that it impacted the product, or that it was for some reason more dangerous?
No, I don't know. I think the thing we definitely, I'm sure now, yeah, because what is time? Like you said, like there was a stretch there, this could be 5 years ago at this point or more, where it was just like, the defense was just in an impossible position because of all the foul baiting that was allowed by offensive players, like the Trae Young, like drive, totally change your path to get contact. The Chris Paul would do it all the time. Like, So I think like we actually are maybe allowing more physical defensive play in that like any contact was just benefit to the offense in in the last half decade or so. So maybe this is already sort of happening, but yeah, I don't know. Like if you isn't basketball like theoretically a non-contact sport? Like you're not supposed to be able to hold and obstruct and do all this other stuff. So like this would change it, I guess, really back to what it was like in the 80s where you could just like get a handful of jersey with on defense all the time.
I guess I could see like, especially this, if you're looking at the way that the off arm stuff is called or not called, depending on how you want to frame it. Like, if you see offensive players getting that advantage, why shouldn't defensive players like have something to counter that with?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would make it so like very small, very quick players would be at a disadvantage because they can't use that physicality and they would be a victim of like physical defense.
I also think as a Warriors fan, you might argue that Steph Curry is defended physically enough away from the ball, especially in the playoffs. Is that where you're going with this?
Leave my guy alone.
Next one we have is from Andy Tobo. I would like to ban the charge call. Just make it a personal foul to run into somebody too violently and stop having people diving in front of defenders and throwing themselves backwards. Anecdotally, I agree. Like, sort of in an idea, like I don't know if you could ban the charge altogether, but I don't want to see players undercutting other players. I mean, I would like, where would Kyle Lowry rank among the greats if they banned charges?
Kyle Lowry is not in favor of this rule. I think that's pretty clear.
But he's like on his way out of the league, so maybe he doesn't care too much. So I don't. What would be the like? Because if you then ban charges, do you think that like what would I guess what would be the primary consequence of that? Is like if you're banning charges, does that mean like defenders can't get in the path at all? So this is going to increase the number of drives and the number of plays at the rim, and then increase scoring even further? Or are you saying ban charges in the sense of just like almost anything within reason goes? So I would just be curious as what you think the effects of something like this would be.
It feels to me like if you ban the charge and you have there's no longer an incentive for a defender to beat an offensive player to the spot, stand still, and take a hit. What you'll have is offensive players are no longer afraid to, like, if you're trying to like stop. So I guess like one, you would have offensive players attacking bodies like way more aggressively because like now nobody's ever set and it's up to the official to decide, I guess, like, was that too violent of a collision? I think the whole idea of like it's a charge when the defender is set, that's certainly the most common charge taken. I guess you could take a charge or it's an offensive foul if you're not set, but the off arm comes out or a shoulder gets lowered or whatever. But like, I think it makes it too difficult to decide because then you're just like, you know what I mean? Like it's too hard to decide. Was the offensive player out of control? Was the defensive player like, you just need some kind of baseline, I think. And if like being set and in position when the upward shooting motion starts, it's like, did he accomplish that or not? And then it's a charge or it isn't based on those criteria. That feels clean enough. I would say, I think something needs to be done, whether it's like position needs to be established sooner by the defender or you move the charge circle out. Just because if I totally agree that the whole like stepping under is like, we got to get that out of the game, injury reasons. And like, that's just, it sucks to watch that. Like, oh, congratulations. Like a 6'2" guard just undercut somebody, who was taken off from really far away. That like, I don't want that in the game either.
And I don't necessarily want unimpeded dunks though either, but I think the extending their like charge circle feels like the best move here. I don't know. I guess you could argue like where some guys are taking off, like how far do you need to extend it for it to like materially matter? But I think even if you extend it a little bit, theoretically, you're just making that less dangerous because guys aren't, they're not attempting like most of these players are not lifting off from like the foul line to go for a dunk type deal.
Yeah. No, I mean that this gets at like, this is an issue that like the undercuts and like the getting in there late, like we got to figure something out for that. So I don't know about this banning it altogether, but I think a tweak might be in order.
You want to take us to our next one?
Yeah. Let's go back to this is from BJP. Let's go back to the travel rules of high school / college level, remove the gather step and force traveling and carries at a strict level. This is actually from Steve Kerr. I think, I don't know if we can prove it's not.
I like this one independent of I don't really care. Like the carrying just doesn't bother me. Like that is if you want to, like if it's egregious, like the one time LeBron kind of picked it up, stopped dribbling for 2 seconds, then started dribbling again. But if you wanted to do something with the gather steps, even like some of the pivot foot things, I don't have an issue with that. What about you?
No, I think I always feel like it's me just getting old, but the gather step is something that like I never learned, and it's like, well, therefore this is stupid. I think this is an unfair advantage. I kind of dig the step throughs that everybody's doing now, because I think technically by the book that is not a travel if that other foot does not come down and you release the ball, and that's like a cheat code sometimes, because defenders have not fully adjusted to the guys that Jalen Brunson does it all the time, for example. Like
Thompson's had some wicked step throughs.
Brandon Pajemski does it. It's always like, it's weird that it's like the super athletic guys and then the really small, like under athletic guys that make it work. I think I like this because it just feels like guys are getting 3 steps, and it's literally impossible to defend like a 3-step Giannis Euro in transition if he's allowed to do that. I agree. I think the gather step thing and just deciding when you start counting steps needs to be modified because the NBA is fundamentally different now in how that rule is enforced than other levels.
Where do you land on the carrying aspect of it all?
It bothers me less. It does feel like certain, like Ja Morant, I think, is one that has like perfected the art of, and Jordan Poole got called. Remember when carrying was a point of emphasis for like 2 months, a couple seasons ago, and Jordan Poole's turnover rate spiked like 5x because he just kept getting called for it. I think I would like a little bit less carrying called, or more carrying called, but it's like, hard to be less.
Grant's like, let's not even dribble anymore.
Let's just tuck the ball like a running back and take 5 steps. The traveling seems to me like a bigger issue because not everybody is an egregious carrier, but almost everybody is an egregious traveler by like old school rules at this point.
Would you care to know why Jalen Johnson is pictured on the card for this one?
No, I would. Yes.
Among rotation players, he leads the league in travels per 36 minutes.
Really good stat. I would have needed a lot of guesses to get that one.
Next up is yours. We got there.
Just another viewer experience situation here. There's a theme in my suggestions. I want to eliminate 1 full timeout per half, and I want another one converted. What happened to the 20-second timeout? We don't do it anymore. And you get to do the hands on the shoulders thing as a coach with signal. That's a 20-second timeout.
You just want Bill Kennedy having the ability to flex?
Oh, for 100%. I missed the 20-second timeout because it was like I don't know. It takes me back. We can do without all the timeouts, right? Like now it's an ad thing as much as anything else. I think the game would just be better, especially like they do speed up the timeouts late when it's clearly just for like an offense defense sub or like to drop up. But like I need the 20-second timeout back. You're getting a minute or 2 back in terms of like wasted time from that, and cut another one. You might get 3 or 4 minutes back if it goes to commercial and you got to do the whole ramp up, get the ball back in bounds. So I'm just trying to trim. Dan, can you tell I'm someone who tries really hard to watch more than one game every night, and I need to blow through the downtime? Like we need less downtime.
I agree for the most part. And I just, if you made it a 10-second timeout, like it's still going to be like a minute timeout or whatever the amount of
right. Yeah.
And my whole issue is, and I just don't, there's nothing or at least I haven't seen evidence to suggest this. If we're now cutting down on the number of in-game breaks for players, I know everyone thinks that load management sucks and that these players are soft, but like the amount of injuries just continue to go up. And so if we're just going to make these guys have less rest, like, do you think that are we going to reach a point where it's too far? Okay, now you have the games played minimum. And that would be my one concern, but these are such like granular breaks we're talking about. I guess it doesn't matter. And I'm all for speeding up just the dead time. So I want to make that clear. Maybe it's just enforce how long full timeouts are supposed to be. Like, can
we have a, well, yeah, right. Exactly. That might be the real answer. Can we have a digression? So you mentioned like the load management and the like injuries will go up if you're, taxing players more by cutting out some of the rest. I think I've reached a point now where I really do think there's enough evidence to suggest that like, it's not the number of games played. It's the travel, the whatever. It really is that the game requires more physical exertion in terms of like time spent sprinting and changing direction and attention and stuff on both ends than it ever has. And so like it's not like give a guy a game off, that's the right way to load manage. Like I think the only way you get injuries to trend back down is you do institute rule changes, like maybe a freedom of movement thing where it's like it's just harder to move around as much. And so guys just are not as taxed. I don't know how you ever implement that, but right. I'm starting to think the load management thing is really just like we're going at it the wrong way. It is just about how the game's played. And this is the new normal. Like there will be injuries like this as long as the game is played at like this level of intense physicality and like speed and that kind of thing.
It's almost kind of like you need to where you need to figure out how to load manage is in the game.
Right.
It's not even minutes played, but let's use Steph as an example again. It's how can we get Steph a rest in the game? Is it okay? Sure, cut his minutes, but it's also, he's not flying around the court as much because we have other options, which you can now do with the Jimmy Butler there in theory. I think you're 100% spot on with that. And that would be for people that want to go back to sort of 90s eras basketball, if it's going to slow it down and the possessions there's fewer possessions, there's more post ups. They call that brand of basketball was more physical. And I've no doubt, like in a vacuum, it was more physical body to body. Right. But in terms of non-contact physicality, I think you're absolutely right.
It's just like, again, the Ben Taylor video is like, guys 30 years ago on offense would stand still for like the whole shot clock sometimes. And like, that just does not exist anymore. It's a totally different game. Anyway, we can go to the next rule.
We are leaving the realm of us. This is now all submissions from here on out, which is me just displacing blame. If anyone gets mad, clearly is what's happening here. Our next one, no more retroactive fouls awarded during the replay review for other reasons, like out of bounds calls. This one comes from Jamie O'Grady. I fave it. I think this is just like what's like, especially on challenges where it's like if you're challenging one thing and you could win the challenge, but your team could come out behind from it. I don't like that element of it.
I guess like this really is just going to get down to like replay itself, really, because like the question needs to be, is the point of replay to like get the call correct, like across the board? Like, do we make sure we document like what actually happened on like, oh, it went out on him, but it was a foul that we didn't see. So that's how we resolve it. Cause like, that's actually what happened. So you should call that. Or is it just like, do we need to, I don't know how I feel about this one. It feels like a bigger question. It's like goes to the purpose of replay. Like, are you trying to get it right? Or are you trying to like get it pretty close, but also keep the game moving?
I will say, if I had to pick, I actually think that replay reviews are going to go in the opposite direction of this, where they're going to be expanded to include more things under the umbrella, maybe even more challenges. And I think the solution might just be, I mean, this is different because it can impact the outcome. There's got to be a way to just make that process faster, right?
Do you see suggestions of like make the whole thing like an offsite decision? So it's like
they have to caucus New Jersey. All those people are sitting in front of those TVs. Like, don't even have the refs on site. Have to be the ones to do it. Just, I mean, the only thing I want to retain is Bill Kennedy and his dramatic pauses in theater. I saw some people getting mad. It was actually the Warriors Nets game, I think, where he like had this long pause. I tweeted out a clip and some people like, oh, I don't want to see this ever again. I find
great.
Like that funny.
No, wrong opinion. That was great. I enjoyed that last night as we're recording this. That was great. Okay. So I think that's really it. Like, because if I hope we're not stepping on another suggestion here, but it's like have Secaucus decide it. Then like the decision-making tends to be more uniform. The refs on the floor don't even need to look at anything. They just get relayed. You pop the headphones on. They'll tell you, like Secaucus will tell you what the call is. You relay the call to the crowd. That's it. That has to be faster than what we're doing right now.
This specific one from Jamie, though, I guess I don't know where I land on it. I think I actually like it, but then it's just because you're going to see the replay. I don't know if you want to give, let's say, fans or analysts of the aggrieved team, or even not the aggrieved team, but just us in general. If we look back and say, oh, like, no, this was actually all, they were challenging something else, like the contact on Jaylen Brown, but it's like, it's actually off of Jaylen Brown and it should be the Cavs ball or something. I'm in favor of accuracy. So I actually feel like I wouldn't go this route because then you add you're adding more pressure, which I guess would be a good thing. You're adding more pressure on, like, if a coaching staff wants to challenge, if they're worried that it could also go against them, they're going to be less likely. I don't know. This is a thinker.
Here's the thing. So the reason I think I'm against this suggestion, though much appreciated, Jamie, is like taken to its logical extreme. Ball's out of bounds off Jaylen Brown. We're going to challenge that. Let's review it. Turns out Jaylen Brown body. No, let's see which way would it have to be. Jimmy Butler body slammed Jaylen Brown, and in the process, the ball went off Jaylen Brown. But we're not going to review this for a foul on Jimmy Butler because we're just looking at who it went off of. And so then you have to go back into the game having said, no foul. And it's like everybody watched the replay. It's like, what are we do? So it's like you gotta, if you're gonna open the replay box and everything that comes out with it, like you sort of have to try to get it right. I think, right? Like that's the reason this rule exists now is to try to get it right.
I think if you're gonna go this path, which if that's what you want is fine, you then need to restrict like reviews in general somehow.
Sure. Yeah.
Our next one comes from Ogiri 9000. Make the winner of the All-Star game, West or East, have home court advantage in the finals. This assumes we go back to, I guess, like the previous version of the All-Star game, because what would have happened this year when they were sticking?
Yeah, I don't know. So baseball did this, or I don't even know. Major League Baseball used to have the All-Star game winner have home court in the World Series, right? I think that was a thing.
No, it was. I don't think it still is though, right?
No, because it was like, that's dumb. Like that's a bad idea. I think like so many things would have to happen with respect to the All-Star game and like the quality of play in it and the investment by players in it for this to be on the table for me. Because even then it's like you're going to have a vast majority of All-Stars on both teams probably not having any skin in the game because maybe a vast majority is a stretch, but like a lot of players, like my team's not going to the finals. Who cares? Like, why am I trying? You know what I mean? Like,
here's an example.
Exactly. So that's such a home court advantage in the finals. Like, I don't know, go back in the last like 25 finals. How many series does it swing if you flip who has home court advantage? Like a decent number, probably. So like, that's a huge prize to pin on the results of a game nobody cares about.
I think it would just make more sense if you knew that every single player was going to be invested in it, and there's no way to guarantee that will ever happen. So I think I wouldn't go this route. And by the way, you don't think this is that was your point. You don't think this will incentivize enough players to care about the All-Star game?
No, I think you would. No, I don't think it would.
I still think the solution, this is more of an NBA All-Star solution. I like the idea of the draft. It needs to happen playground style, the night of, in front of the arena on national television. They got to the point where they did it sort of on national television remotely. Make it happen in person so that you could see players get annoyed about where they're picked. And then maybe that might incentivize trying more than putting finals home court advantage on the line.
Grievances, great fuel. I think that's the way to go.
What do we have next?
All right. This is from Velidus. Nationally televised NBA games should actually start on time. Did you see the stat that ESPN games start an average of 14 minutes after their posted start time? Turner is like 7 minutes, which is bad, but it's not 14.
You know why it's shorter though, right?
Why?
Because we publish things for that parent company and have a say, and we were able to knock them down from 14 all the way down to 7.
I mean, this is. Who's against this other than the networks themselves? Like
the advertising and marketing department.
It is insane. Like it is ridiculous how late. And if it's a West Coast game and you're adding 14 minutes to that and it's an ESPN game, so they're all a half hour longer than they should be. In addition to that, I'm spoiled out here, but you're going to bed at like 2 a.m. after games sometimes, probably.
Yeah. Don't even the Knicks Lakers game the other night as an example.
Yeah.
My God, I want the games to be done by like 12:30 Eastern time would be great for me. But who other than like the advertising and marketing department of the league and who would actually be against this? I'm trying if there's a fan out there that likes is it because they get off work and it's like at 8 and like, oh, we're home by 8:14, I'm able to watch this? I don't know.
Yeah. I would say because we have the good league pass, and I never watch games totally live, I'll wait an hour. This is not an issue for me because I just bang through. Yeah, I'm not watching any pregame. I'm not watching any halftime. Half the time I'm zipping through free throws. So that's my issue.
I know you don't have this problem clearly, but anyone listening, watching, let us know in the comments or our Discord, whatever. Does anyone else have a problem like watching things that the outcome's already predetermined? Because when I do that, what I do feels like work the most. Yep. Whereas I still recognize I'm working when it's happening live, but I feel more involved and attached to the outcome of it. And
Mhm.
so just always rewatching stuff. Like, I'm not gonna lie, watching film is like an obligation for me. I don't sit there and I'm not like drooling over it. I recognize that I'm lucky, but at the same time, I would prefer to watch this live as it was happening, or rewind it a few seconds rather than, okay, not that I think I can impact the outcome. I sort of like living through the outcome as it's happening.
Totally. If I know what happens, I'm 85% less interested in the game. Like I can't, it's not the same experience.
I do know not to spoil things that are happening with the Warriors, like the Nets Warriors game the other night. They started out, it was an atrocity, and I knew they were going to come back. I knew Steph was going to hit that half court shot, and you text me like, "I'm only in the first half of Warriors, whatever." I was like, "I'm very anxious to hear what you think at halftime."
You know what else I said is I think they're going to come back and win this.
You did say that. That's right.
By the way, good call.
Very prophetic by you. This next one, Grant, is I think deserves some unpacking.
Yeah.
Here. So it comes from Candon 2951. Eliminate the draft and allow rookies to become free agents. Economic studies show that competitive balance is not preferred based on live game attendance, and rookies are exploited in the name of competitive balance. I'm very curious to see where you land on this. Is basically, should the NBA abolish the draft?
I think I've tried to think about this quite a bit ahead of time because I know I don't know if you and I have discussed this, but at some point over the years, I feel like we've written, or this has been an issue in the past, like just draft, yay or nay, kind of that thing has cycled through a few times. So I think at first blush, like it's objectively unusual and weird that the NBA operates this way. Whereas like if you compare it to other professions, it's like you get out of school and then you go find a job where you'd like to live and a place you want to work. Maybe you have connections there that pre-exist, like that kind of thing. Like that's how the real world tends to function. And this is just like, no, you're going to be a millionaire, except we get to decide who's paying you to some extent. And that's like a strange thing to kind of get over. It feels like weirdly like patriarchal and like almost like it's not forced labor, but it's like, you don't get to choose where you go. The number one pick in the draft that probably just made millions in college in this era can't decide. Now you can hold out, you can steer yourself places like through the workout process or whatever. Like good agents will, to some extent, get to influence where players with a lot of draft clout go, but it's just weird. So like, if you bump on that, I get it. Now, like, and then the other side of it is the other thing I've been thinking about, and then I'll throw to you, because like the draft does theoretically preserve competitive balance. And I think the changes that have been made to the lottery structure have made it so that like, egregious tanking is a problem. The payoff's not such that egregious tanking is like clearly the greatest way to go. Teams have been more careful about that, I think.
I mean, look at who won the number one pick in this past draft, Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta had no business. Like they didn't try to tank and they got, so the draft is not perfect. I think though the alternative, and maybe we're not really addressing the competitive balance and live game attendance and all that stuff, more it's like the rookie exploitation thing. I think the alternative is a little scarier to me. And I think the alternative might be so damaging to competitive balance that like it would if it's as extreme as I think it has the potential to be, whatever economic studies are saying that competitive balance is not preferred, it might like just walk over that to where it's like, what I'm talking about is everybody wants to play for the Lakers. Everybody wants to play for Miami or Houston or whatever. And if you have the ability to steer yourself where you want to as a incoming rookie, doesn't it seem like certain powerhouses would be getting like huge advantages where like who's choosing to play in, small market city of your choice if all things are equal?
So to play devil's advocate, and by the way, I think the NBA has moved, not that it was ever embracing this idea. First of all, the draft is its own like coverage process for the league. And so if you get rid of it,
yeah, that's a big element of it too.
That's like, they'll never do it. And if anything, insofar as they would ever consider it, it feels like the way that the CBA is set up, where they've like tried to limit like the amount of control players have on where they're going, because all the incentives with extensions now, and now players will like free agency is just not as interesting as it used to be. It feels like they're going in the opposite direction. I share a lot of your same concerns. And I know, so Candon is saying that economic studies show that this isn't going to impact live game attendance. My whole thing is, I know the salary cap might negate some of the fallout to where it's like, okay, if you want to go to the Lakers as the number one pick, like they're not going to have the money to give you
Right.
that another team would. At the same time, like over a longer period, you might say that parity doesn't matter. And I think in any given season, like I think people genuinely liked super teams and found them compelling. And so that stretch of the Kevin Durant era Warriors, where Warriors Cavs felt inevitable, is fine. That was 4 years. If you have to go through that where it just feels like, oh, the same 6 or 7 teams, and I know if you go, it might feel like that way anecdotally. I like what we have now where it feels like so many different teams could win the title in this moment. And I don't think we get to this point if there's not a draft. And case in point would be, is Oklahoma City in the position that it is? And then like,
yeah.
The other thing is, what does this do to the trade market, which is another big deal of team building? Because now you're never trading draft picks. So what can you trade? Are you trading rookie exceptions, which I guess would essentially be the same thing? And I would also counter here, the real world, the NBA is not, I tend to be more pro player. Like, I'm not going to root for the billionaire owners in the bottom line of the league. At the same time, like, is it the real world in the sense, like, we're talking about millions of dollars here. And the stuff that seems more sketchy is getting a player to guarantee that drafting them in the second round to save money rather than having to pay them a rookie scale at the end of the first. But I would also wonder, let's just say you get rid of the draft. As of right now, next year, the last pick in the first round is going to make over $2 million in year one. I think it'll be like 2.2 or 2.3. Our team's going to want to pay those types of players. If they had a choice, you could say the rookie scale works out in favor for the teams a lot of the times in the lottery or whatever. And overall, it is cost controlled relative to the percentage of the cap. But could you see a situation where if there's no draft and you're the 28th best prospect, are they actually even going to want to pay you what you would make now coming out of the draft? So I wonder if this is another thing where even if you're looking at it from the player only perspective, are we talking about like 5 guys every year that this truly impacts to where they would have their choice of team or would have made enough money to where they'd want to take a pay cut to play somewhere else? I totally recognize that, like, this is just, I find it too integral to team building right now, especially when you look at how extensions and restricted free agency work after the draft too.
And then like zoom out a little bit, like what problems are we solving if we're getting rid of the draft? Like you would say one is like the idea that a rookie can't choose where he's going to play. And that's odd. Like, okay, is that a problem? Maybe. And then after that, is the problem we're solving too much parity? Is that what we're going after here? Like we want like a Premier League situation where, like, for long stretches, 4 or 5 teams who are, big powerhouse clubs that spend the most or whatever are at the top of things. Like, so I guess if your problem with the league is, or one of your problems with the league is that we don't have enough just like dynasties with teams that seem like insurmountably good, then I guess this would probably help that. But I don't know that I think that's a problem. I think like dynastic teams kind of arise no matter what you do, because somebody always figures out how to just game the system or lucks into talent. And you have these windows where, like, Boston's in one now. Boston's been in the conference finals like 50 times, like with this group, I just don't know if I see problems that are so desperately in need of a solution that we go this route. And I don't know that this like solves anything.
Do you view this, because I go back and forth, the word exploited was used here, and I think there's something too. If you get drafted by the wrong team,
right,
like they don't develop you properly or they just don't do right, but like, yeah, that really could fuck up your career earnings to no end. It just feels like when you're dealing at this scale of money, for the most part, I don't know. Like, it just feels like the guys who are being exploited, if anything, are going to be the second round guys, the 2-way contract guys, more than the people who are being guaranteed life-changing money regardless. And I hate to downplay it in that route because it's all relative. I don't know that I feel like players are being exploited, especially when, like, these things are collectively bargained as well. Like,
yeah, I think, like, the other thing I just thought of is that you got to think about fan bases that all they have in a lot of seasons to care about is their team's draft position and who they're going to get to pick, because, like, that's the payoff for being really bad. Now, again, we've already talked about, like, flattening lottery odds means it's like there's no sure thing, but it's like if you're I don't know, pick if you're Charlotte, a Charlotte fan or a Washington fan or whatever, like, and you're going through this season and you're thinking there's no, like, we might not get any good young players in this draft cycle. Like, this might just be our team. Now you'd have to run your team very differently. You wouldn't strip things down as much, maybe, like, and maybe that's a positive, but like, I think you lose a lot of fan attention if there's not the silver lining of a terrible season being we might pick first in the draft, or we're going to get somebody in the top 6, 7, 8 or whatever, right? Like, you lose that.
Do you think it would add stakes or lead it mostly the same? Where it's, I mean, kind of look like the Thunder popularized this with the Sam Presti special contracts, where they're finding these guys either in the second round or these undrafted guys, and they're turning into real players. Does this then? I think it would increase the importance of like your scouting department identifying guys who are not drawing the attention of other teams, because if you're in those less desirable markets, let's say, like those are the players that for the most part, even if you have all the cap space in the world, I mean, maybe these players are young enough and it's the NBA to where like it would be more of a level playing field in a rookie free agency class. But I think if you're trying to give these players more agency, I'd like to see them not have to go to college at all. Might be the better solution here, which then you're still entering the pool of the draft, of course. But it feels so unlikely that the NBA ever would get rid of the draft. And I think this is just kind of one of the situations where I understand it, where it's okay, this might not be perfect, but the way you phrased it just now, where it's, you need every team to believe that it has a chance.
Yeah.
And I feel like this, even if you have the most competent ownership, scouting department, great team culture, this would just skew the playing field too much towards these big markets that, again, the current CBA has tried to make sure can't keep these teams together for as long as possible.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting, I mean, I don't think the draft's going away, but like there really are decent arguments on both sides of it.
We do have another lottery-based, though, suggestion here, Grant, if you want to take us through it.
All right. So this is from Matty L. Do away with the lottery. Base it on record on regular season. Worst team gets first pick, similar to what the NFL does. So this pretty clearly would bring tanking back in like extreme versions, right? And we just have to decide if we want that over what we've got right now.
I don't think I do, because you could argue that some of the tanking jobs, when you're just going after the top 4 flattened spots, can get egregious enough. But could you just imagine what would be happening right now in New Orleans and Utah and Washington if this was the case?
It's like, it's a tough thing because you sort of, so if you're one of those teams that's in the bottom 4, as a fan, I guess, like, or I don't know, everybody involved sort of has to embrace the fiction that we're competing, even though it's so clear like what your incentives should be. If you believe that the best way to build sustained winning is to find a superstar, and that the best way to do that is with a high draft pick, like that does seem to be how you get your Giannis. You draft your guys, Giannis, Jokic, SGA. Look at the MVP frontrunners. Like that's just how you do it. This would just be this. I think it was a good decision to flatten the lottery odds because you don't have this like breakneck race to the bottom. Now you could, if you do this, if you get rid of the lottery and you just make it straight reverse order of record like the NFL does, I think you need some additional rules that sort of bolster the fiction of competition, where it's like more robust, preventions against resting healthy players again, and that's just, how do you possibly enforce that? Like lower back strain, like, well, okay, prove that the guy doesn't have that issue. It just makes it harder, I think.
I would agree with you. I think that's man. Who?
I mean, this is how it was for a long time. Like, it's not that long ago that this was the rule.
So we have one in the opposite direction now from Hans Bungle. Weight the non-playoff teams in reverse order so the best record gets the best shot at the top pick. That's why you didn't even notice that Cooper Flag is in a Miami Heat jersey right here.
Oh, yeah. It's like, who is that? I hate that it took you pointing that out for me to notice that. Okay, so what you get here is this I think, again, hurts. It makes it harder for the teams that just need the talent to get better to acquire it. And I think maybe you address this after a few more years of the current lottery system. Because what's the positive is you keep like mid-pack teams competitive for longer, as opposed to which they kind of would be anyway. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. Do you have a strong feeling?
I don't have a strong feeling. I'm wondering how. Well, I guess if you're just getting the best odds, it would almost incentivize mediocrity. And then I
Yeah.
don't know, like, you might put yourself, okay, well, you get the top pick, but then how do you want to build from there? Is it going to rush this? So say if the Miami Heat, they have building blocks in place. So I guess that'd be the point of it. Oh, you have Cooper Flag and the Miami Heat, like they're then incentivized to keep building. But if you're incentivized to get mediocre, can you also trap yourself though? Because what if you had Cooper Flag on this super mediocre team and you can't get worse because that's not going to help you get more prospect? I just don't. That seems a little backwards too.
Wouldn't it be strange too if like you had, I guess it's not specified, but say you're in the last play-in spot, or say you're like 6th in the West or whatever, and let's say if you're in the play-in, you're eligible for a shot at the top pick. Like, it would be very strange that a team with like guaranteed playoff position would have to be thinking about like, should we try to lose on purpose to fall to 7? You know what I mean? Like, you'd have teams that's like, I don't think you want teams that are competitive, that probably have winning records, like losing on purpose down the stretch of the season. I think it's better if the teams that are really bad are the ones losing on purpose.
We also had, this is tangentially related. I don't think I included it. If it comes up later, I apologize. That there should be some sort of a tournament to determine like the win. So you have the worst teams in a tournament and the winner determines the number 1 pick. I would just be curious. That'd be interesting, and I know this isn't like the exact case everywhere, but how do you get players invested in a tournament where the outcome is it makes it easier for your team to get someone better than you?
Exactly. That's like, you'd be so conflicted. I think that is the problem. You're like, play really hard so your replacement will be better. Like that's a tough sell, I think.
Next one up, bit of a long one. So if you want to get a cup of coffee while I read this, shout out to a lot of forethought here from John Misty. Team free throws are rotated via a lineup similar to in baseball. When someone subs into the game, they take their place in the free throw lineup. 1 to 5 for the players your team has on the court. 1 trip to the free throw line would go as normal from there. This would reduce Hack-a-Shaq / Rudy / Ben to 0 because the teams wouldn't be able to depend on that one player dragging the games to a stop. But it would also stop over the top foul baiting because you need to depend on a team-wide free throw percentage and your individual scoring stats will be lower.
There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. So it's okay. So I think you probably, some of the goals stated here would probably be achievable. Like the foul baiting, because it's like, if you're just SGA, like you're not as incentivized to like accentuate contact. If now I see I should have picked the team with a more obviously terrible free throw shooter. If you're, I don't know, if you're Jamal Murray and DeAndre Jordan is up next in the free throw rotation, you might not be looking for calls as much. Like just that, I think might be. Although you like to get the team foul, I don't know.
And don't you think the way that they've kind of made the down the street, like especially in crunch time, like Haka is just not as big of an issue as it was 10 years ago for sure.
And you might, if the other team was aware of like whose turn it was, then you might have Haka just like, so I'm gonna go tackle Jason Tatum because again I should have picked someone with it. You know what I mean? So because I know that this terrible free throw shooter is like next up in the rotation, that'd be really weird.
And would it be also weird to see players maybe avoid like driving because they don't want like you don't Scotty Barnes doesn't want Jakob Poeltl taking a foul shot or something.
Yeah, you did a better job of finding the right examples there. So, but also, if you sub, like, what prevents a team from subbing out a bad free throw shooter when it's their turn in the rotation in the order?
Well, you would burn. Well, in theory, it could be a dead ball too. Just like you burning a timeout to do that would be a pretty big functional decision.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think. Like, well, you could do it between free throws. Like that's not a. There are ways you could sub guys in and out without a timeout.
How hard do you think it would be to keep track of this as like the viewer?
Right. Yeah, that would be. You'd almost need a graphic like on the bottom of the screen at all times, like with
sponsored by who?
Yeah, this is
very 11 out of 10 thought process on this
for sure. John Misty thought harder about this than any rule change I thought about. So
I do wonder if this is just maybe it's good and it's just too radical for me to embrace. I would like if you tried this in the G League or something, like I would absolutely be interested to see how it goes.
Right.
What do we got next, Mr. Hughes?
All right, this is from we got Ryan Hess and Let's Be Rational. I'll go with Ryan Hess here first. They're kind of going to dovetail. Eliminate the corner three. Just have the arc end at the sideline. And then Let's Be Rational says fix the 3-point line to be a true arc. It would eliminate the short threes along the baselines. Hopefully it would bring back a better balance in scoring. Yeah, so I guess this is one of the more frequently trotted out solutions to the everybody just shoots threes thing. What are the knock-on effects here if we get rid of the corner three? You shoot corner twos, I guess, because you're still going to want to. Well, yeah, because then your defenders will not pay attention to corner shooters. So those guys probably just on offense won't be in the corners anymore, because why would you? Because now that's a terrible shot. That's like a long two at a tough angle. So does that mean that everything is above the break and you have 5 guys like dotted around a smaller space and it's more congested?
It's either more congested beyond the arc or it's more congested inside it. I don't think the spacing would remain the same with lower values to those corners. I really don't think it would, at least.
I don't think so either. So what's the positive? What are we gaining from this, do you think?
So a lot of the problem, because we had some variation of this from a few people, I really do think the perception of, one, the average corner 3-point shot is just, it's because it's shorter, their percentage. I think this year it's 38.5% is the average from the corners versus 35.6% outside of the corners. Mm-hmm. That's a big difference. Corner 3-pointers are also taken less. And that's why I also kind of push back. A lot of people say it gives players who aren't that good too much impact on the game. But then wouldn't this just sort of have the opposite effect to where it's already, I think, if you're a spacing liability, so if you're space or liability in the regular season, maybe your team plays you, but you're unplayable in the playoffs, where you're kind of just opening the door for is maybe a different type of lesser player where it's okay. Like maybe there's like Andre Robertson might be like still in the league at this point if there was no corner 3-point shot involved.
Yeah. I think I guess I would push back too against the idea that the corner three allows I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like less skilled players to be out there. Because I
think that's the not the prevailing, but that's one of the arguments that's made about the like prevalence of the 3-point shot in general, is that because you have to concern yourself with guys who can make these shots that are high value shots, but maybe they can't dribble and they're not good defenders. I do think we tend to see the latter when they're not good defenders. Like those guys get like rooted out in crunch time in the playoffs for sure.
Exactly what I was going to say is I think I'd be more inclined to believe the opposite is true because the corner three is so valuable, you got to be able to shoot it if you're not an on-ball guy. And you also have to be able to defend an offense that puts 2 guys in the corners that require you to cover a ton of space. You know what I mean? Like ton of space. Like you've got to be a good athlete and mobile. And yeah, I guess maybe not. You can be like a specialist sort of and get away with just being a corner 3-point shooter. But like who are the most, like PJ Tucker just only ever shot corner threes for some of those Houston teams, but he guarded 5 positions and played center. Like that's incredibly skillful. It's just not like he's not running pick and rolls and posting up. Like, so I think the overall skill required because of the corner three, I think I would argue is higher than it would be if you eliminated it, because you could get Jerandre Robertsons or whoever's out there that just like, they can't do something just full stop. You know what I mean? Like so I would be more inclined to like, if you want to widen the court and make the corner three like as long as the above the break three, that's interesting to me. I'm more interested in that.
I actually think that's what I was going to ask you is, and we actually have something that I think was PJ Tucker inspired that I kind of like though, coming up. I don't know when. This though, I would argue in favor of widening it then, because then corner threes become more difficult. Now, as people have talked about, now you're shortening the baseline, and you could say, well, you could push back like the baseline and the bench, but then you're going to push out seats and stuff. So it gets into that, but I don't care about that.
Yeah,
like if we're talking about strictly the game, and if you're trying to optimize the game or make this version of the NBA better, I don't think getting rid of the corner three would make as positive of a difference as just widening the court and then lengthening what the corner threes are in the first place.
And also, if you're paying for front row NBA seats, you'll pay more than that for, if you widen the court and you lose that quote unquote front row as a franchise, you could just up the cost of the new front row seats so that you're like offsetting a lot of what.
I think this is the 3rd time I brought this up on the podcast and only happened like 4 days ago. if the Dallas Mavericks of all teams think they can get away with raising their season ticket prices by 10% or whatever it is, then yes, this can absolutely work out.
Right.
Next one we have from Alex from MPGH, Alex from PGH, excuse me. Don't stop the game for free throws. Have them happen at the same time at the end of the quarters. You haven't laughed at any of my backgrounds. I'm very upset.
That's the Grizzlies. That's the Grizzlies hype man. I know that. I recognize
Justin
him.
is his name.
Okay.
He's one of his hair always gets me. I don't know what it is. I don't like it or I don't hate it or love it. I think that in-game MCs either would hate this or love it because could you imagine this guy, are you narrating what's happening with the free throws?
Oh, yeah. So I think I saw a version of this suggested a couple different times, and this comes up, I forget where I saw it originally. Don't you think this just isn't everybody going to the concession stand in the bathroom when this is happening? If you're just lining people up and having them shoot a bunch of free throws and
if they're not, can I ask you a question? Would you rather watch these guys take foul shots or, this isn't, I almost had Red Panda in here as sort of but she's halftime entertainment. So that's not going to impede that. But I would rather see because we have the good, well, talk about a superiority complex here.
We got the good league pass.
The league pass that we have, I'm seeing all the in-arena stuff in between. And I would, as someone who covers the league and gets paid for it, if I'm actually watching that part, I'd rather see all of that than dudes lining up to take their foul shots.
Yeah, me personally, I should be in favor of this because I would just not watch the free throws and I would just skip it. And then the game itself would be much quicker.
Now, here, I guess I'm assuming you would have to do this, but doesn't this, if you stay true to the rule through every quarter, doesn't this just eliminate game-winning shots? These just become foul shooting contests at the end of each game.
That's the biggest issue. It's the fourth quarter of it all. Maybe it doesn't matter the first three, but you end the game, and maybe you could make it the rule that just for the first three quarters we do this. Fourth quarter we shoot free throws as normal because otherwise the game ends. The margin is what it is, and okay, Milwaukee's got 8 free throws to shoot. Brooklyn has 4. Who knows what's going to happen? We'll decide this game standing still, not playing, shooting free throws. That's objectively bad.
Do you think players would push back against this by saying there's a chance they could be out of rhythm when they have to go shoot the free throws? Or is it so let's say you pull someone out of the game midway through the first quarter, but they have to shoot free throws at the end of it. Are they just going to be on the practice court rather than watching, they're practicing their free throws or something? That'd be weird.
And guys would say we need the minute rest in the game.
That's a really good point.
We got to have those little breaks, especially since I'm
you
trying
want
to
ads during those foul shots.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know who would want to watch that.
I do think it speeds up the game for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
What do we have next?
All right, this is from Brian Sporek. Bring back the Amnesty Clause. Clause MFers. I'm not going to say it. I don't know why.
You did drop an F-bomb on the last podcast, so your sudden aversion to cuss words is.
I got something about the motherfuckers is it feels more aggressive.
You just said it anyway.
Just said it, yeah. And Joe, who would the Sixers amnesty? It probably would be Embiid, but Paul George would have something to say about it. It's okay. Now, good job, Dan. The Bradley Beal thing I just noticed.
Shout out to anyone watching on YouTube. I finally got Grant to laugh. This took me forever to put together.
Well, you texted me yesterday and said, if you don't laugh, I'll be disappointed. And I'm like, well, great. That's a real setup for organic humor.
Going through all the rule changes takes time for sure. Then to set this up takes a little bit of time. But I was trying to find images and include little Easter eggs where it's this relates to the rule. I didn't need it. That's just, no one's going to care about that except for me. And I'm waiting for what does Grant laugh at? Does he laugh at anything?
Yeah. This is too much pressure on me. Why not bring back the Amnesty Clause? I think it was a good idea. Everybody needs a do-over.
Yeah, but how often does it get recycled? Is it just once every 15 years you get an Amnesty Clause? And how long do you have to use it?
That's a good question. Yeah, you can't have unlimited amnesties. Although, who would use multiple amnesties? Because then you're just adding to payroll year over year that does not attach to a player.
I mean, Matt Ishbia would. my whole thing is you can't. It shouldn't be you just get the amnesty. That shouldn't be something that's every other year. There shouldn't be the biannual amnesty clause or something. My whole thing is the two things I'd be worried about is part of advantage in the NBA is that if you're going to give out these contracts, they need to be good contracts, at least relative to how you want to build your team and how you can build your team. So you're giving it a chance to undo one mistake, but I guess there's the two downsides would be you're incentivizing franchises to be a little bit more reckless because they know they have this in their back pocket. And then the other thing, though, is just like, if you're a really bad franchise, let's go back to those lockout era Knicks, and you amnesty the wrong player. That just looked like where they went to go get, they amnestied Chauncey Billups to go get Tyson Chandler. And so you're opening, in retrospect, that's kind of funny that everyone's like, they should have amnestied Stat, and it was clear in the moment. So I don't know. I mean, this is just a typical Sixers fan looking to get out of the NBA.
Yeah. Sorry, enjoy your Super Bowl. Nobody feels bad for you. We should, when we're really hurting for content, at some point go back and look at that first round of amnesties and grade them, decide which amnesty decision was actually the best and which one was the dumbest. I would imagine dozens of people would love to hear that.
Which player, because they would have to be an amnesty candidate, would be most likely right now to tweet, whatever, post amnesty that?
Joel Embiid wants the Sixers amnesty him.
I would have said Jordan Poole. Feels like the most likely to have actually posted that. Do you actually let's, if
I want it back. Let's do one every 5 years per team.
I think that's too often.
7.
One every CBA?
Well, anytime. Well, how often is that? I guess that's more like 7.
5 or 7 years, actually, probably, right? Yeah.
We're in the same neighborhood. I think I want this back. I think it's kind of fun.
Do you know what's interesting? How many teams would actively use it, right? Because doesn't it feel like there's fewer bad contracts?
It does, but I think, Embiid is he's on the graphic, so that's part of it. But a guy that you've committed to for 3 more years at insane money that might not be good ever again. There's one. It does seem to unfortunately come up with injury situations. And I guess the alternative is to structure a contract like the Pelicans did with Zion, where it's we got outs if we need them. Maybe that's just a trend that needs to increase. I don't know. Would Beal be amnestied?
I think if they were looking, to get out of the second apron, have the right to aggregate contracts, I think the Phoenix would do it.
Yeah, I'm trying. You make a good point. It's not like it felt like 5-6 years ago, really after what summer was it? This 2016 where the cap went up and everybody spent crazily. A lot of those guys might have got amnestied pretty quickly.
Because it would be second apron teams right now, but even those contracts just aren't what the Bucks. What's their bad contract?
Yeah, right. Well, they might have. Would they have? I was gonna say, would they have just amnestied Middleton, for example, instead of
firing if he was coming back? That would be such a dumb.
Yeah, he's a bad example. Yeah, not a lot of options. Still, I want it back.
I guess bring it back then, just for Philly. Is that what the moral of the story was?
Sure.
Interesting. Next up, we have from BJP. Let Dallas move to Vegas and award expansion franchises to Seattle and Dallas. I guess they mean Vegas there. No, let Dallas move to Vegas and award expansion franchises to Seattle and Dallas, but remove cap and pick limitations of previous expansion drafts, i.e. full cap space year 1, allowed to land the first overall pick from the start.
I don't like the idea. Dallas is just what do we even say at this point?
Well, if you're going to put an expansion team in Dallas, why would you move? You would put the expansion team in. I just don't. Logic of, I know because of who owns it, but I'm not trying to do the DeMont, and they can go sell the Mavericks again and then go buy the Vegas expansion.
Right. And they want a casino situation in Dallas. That's the reason they bought the team. It seems although you get pushback on that sometimes.
No, it's 100. That is 100%.
Yeah.
Why they purchased the team.
So, I like anything that gets Seattle a team. Maybe that's the place to start. Here's what I don't want is the current Dallas ownership to be in any way rewarded for anything. So if they actually want to go to Vegas, I'm against it. And if they don't want to be in Dallas, then you have to stay. That's where I'd come down on it.
What's interesting about this to me, do you like Vegas as an NBA market? My whole thing is Mexico City is just a bigger market, and it feels like in Las Vegas, because you're playing in Vegas on the Strip, I'm assuming, you're dealing with a lot of tourists or transplants that are they going to have a ton of loyalty to the Vegas team? I like the WNBA. I know the Aces. It seems like it's worked out well for them there, but I everyone zeroed in on Vegas and Seattle, and I agree with Seattle. But like, if you're looking to build like market goodwill, I almost feel like Mexico City would make more sense. Am I wrong?
No, I think, but Mexico City has its own set of challenges. Like the altitude is one, and just like I forget who wrote it. It's a really detailed, like, sort of look at Mexico City. It might have been Howard Beck. I don't want to get. I could be wrong about like the challenges of like security and just like infrastructure and like there would be a certain percentage of NBA players that are like, I want to live someplace where I can speak English, like, or just things like that would be an issue. But like the market size is insane. Like it would just it would the percentage of fans you'd have to reach in Mexico City would be like vanishingly small to just have a great following because there's so many people there. I think Vegas as a professional sports like you're people that go to Raiders games and it's like, yeah, the whole stadium's full of people that are like there from wherever for the weekend and like, let's see a Raiders. You know what I mean? Like it's not. I wish I knew more about the Aces and like the Knights and to see if like there are like real organic followings. But I don't like Vegas as a sports town. It doesn't make sense. It's too like, you know, what percentage of the population that in Las Vegas at any given time is just like there for 2 days? Like that seems like a weird setup.
Do you know what I do? So this kind of BJP mentions about kind of changing some of the expansion draft rules, and they focus on the cap and the like the cap and the winning the first overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
If you're expanding with 2 teams, because as of right now in an expansion draft, you protect 8 players, I believe. Yeah, it's 8. What about substantially lowering? Like if you're having 2 more franchises come in, shouldn't that number be lowered to like 4?
Oof, that would make for, I mean, just for chaos purposes, I kind of would be into that because man, there'd be some wild decisions teams would have to make. That would be just fun.
Like even if it was 5, it'd be wild, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, either way, it's like a fascinating thing to go through. But yeah, if you like, just take Boston. Like, okay, Boston, like, who are you gonna put out there? Like, you can't spare any of these guys if you're talking about protecting 4 or 5. Like that would be a wild. I don't know. I don't know if it's good, but it would be interesting.
What do you think of? But this is a good point to talk about it. What do you think of expansion overall? Because I think Howard Beck had this very interesting piece of The Ringer. When you look at the players who would be protected, and so it was Michael Pina also did this exercise on The Ringer. Shout out to The Ringer for ruining our own expansion week here. Whatever. Like the best player that would go unprotected for the Atlanta Hawks is Kobe Buffkin. So that's like set up right now. Do you think there's enough talent in the league to actively expand? I would say yes, if you're willing to tweak the parameters as to lower the number of players you can protect, and then again upping their spending power, and of course the ability to maybe win the first pick. I don't know if I buy that, but like up their spending power in the first year.
Yeah, I think. What do I think about expansion generally? I guess, I mean, Seattle needs a team, so again, that's just kind of my baseline for it. I think there's probably no way to get around it being pretty bleak for several years. Like even if you'd have to really relax the protections, probably 4 or 5 is, you might get some real teams put together, but you know, I think anything
you can't expand. I'm sure it's happened at some point. I'm not like a big enough history buff, but you can't introduce 2 teams at the same time and then like it still have them protect 8, right?
Well, no, I wouldn't think so. But you do have to do 2, right? Like I don't think there's ever been any talk of whenever there is
31 teams. The NFL did it for a minute though, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I guess you just have one team, one conference has one more team and whatever. That team's not going to be competing for a playoff spot, so who cares?
Might as well just throw them in the East with the rest of them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll be curious at least to see what if and when expansion happens, what they'll do. Mexico City is like, it's on so many levels a no-brainer, though. You're right.
What do we have next?
All right, this is from Andreas Anderson. Salary cap doesn't matter for off-season trades as long as you're in compliance by season start. Oh, can you imagine? The chaos and like the having to solve the problem before October.
What would be the downside to this?
So the downside would, well, like what's the penalty for not being in compliance? You just have to be. I think the downside is like landing on a punishment that is sufficient so that you don't have a team just lose its mind over the summer. But I don't know if that's a downside.
I think one of the downsides would be, because what are you going to do? They have to be compliant is the entire rule. So doesn't it feel like there'd be one team that would end up like either they're forced into it or it would open the door for bad teams to make worse decisions to where it's, let's say the Phoenix Suns need to be in compliance, but they're unwilling to give up what it takes. Like you could argue that other teams would have the leverage, but what if they go full Nico Harrison and just accept a really bad deal to help another team be in compliance? That feels like the biggest downside. And then maybe it would embolden like bigger swings by these other franchises. And it's on, like, would it be on the rest of the league to feel incumbent to help them get in compliance? I would just be curious. I like this in theory, though, is just the chaos that it would create and the layers it would add to the decision-making process. But I do feel like the teams that end up getting hurt the most from this feels like either, let's say the initial move where you're not in compliance, the team that's giving up the bigger sacrifice, they're getting hurt because they're not going to get as much equity back from selling off. I don't want to use the word sell off, excuse me, but like trading a really good player because that other team knows, well, we need these other assets because you don't want to take on this money to be in compliance. Did you follow any of that, or did I just...
Does the CBA still apply? So it's like, would you still be required to match salaries in trades? Like, because he says salary cap. So does that mean like, you don't? I don't know. It's not fair.
So you're wondering, like, could Phoenix just trade Kevin Durant to Denver? No incoming or outgoing players, and then Denver has to figure out a way to be in like salary cap.
Yeah. Like, is that what this is? Because if it isn't, then like I don't think anything really changes because you're just you're restricted by the rules of like salary matching and the aprons and that. So if it's like the aprons are off, or it's just like it seems like what I don't know what the question is asking, but like I can imagine nothing would change unless you also made it so that like none of the second apron rules apply, none of the aggregation restrictions apply, none of the matching salary applies.
But maybe they don't apply like in the actual transaction, but you have to be like in the but I guess wouldn't that just be like a very protracted way of non-simultaneous trades to where
exactly.
If you did trade Kevin Durant to Denver for nothing, now Denver needs to shed all this money, so they're going to have to send it somewhere else. You could just fold those transactions together. It might be the same thing.
Yep, I think that's a good point. That might be what you ended up with.
Interesting one, though. Thought that was interesting. Next one comes from Discard Tom. Max players get granted an automatic no trade clause. I say no because the sheer number of like what constitutes a max? Like the way that players get maxes, specifically coming off rookie scales, it's just Desmond Bane. I don't know why he first came to mind, but like, why does he have a no trade clause? But Jaren Jackson Jr. won't because he was injured when he negotiates his contract. That's like that. I mean, you look at the Luka situation and you're kind of like, okay, so how do you feel about this? But would you be in favor of, can you negotiate no trade clauses into like that first max deal where you haven't technically been on the team long enough? Or do you only need to be on the team for 4 years? I thought it was longer than that, right?
I think I'm just thinking of like the effects of this, and you saw what a massive like transaction ruiner just Bradley Beal's no trade clause created. If you have 5, 10, 15 more of these in the league, like if you think trades are hard to pull off now, like for it, the league, I think, and in our industry, like really cares about the whole trade economy. And I think this would hurt it to a point where like it would drive interest down. Don't you think?
Yeah. And it's another case where there are probably too many how many players on the Bulls right now would have a no trade clause?
All of them. Josh Giddey.
Nobody's on a max contract. So maybe Josh Giddey would probably exit this summer with a no trade clause for all we know. I think it would just, I think it would make it too easy, and maybe you don't want to protect the franchises who are getting in their own way, but I think it would make it too easy for bad franchises to be even worse.
Yeah, I think the counter is, and I don't agree with this, but like the argument you'd raise is like, it's just objectively unfair that a player and a franchise sign a contract and only one of them gets to really make a decision on who says it's over in terms of like the relationship. Yeah. So you would be like, for a certain class of players, you would be giving them, you put them on equal footing with the organization, which like, well, that seems fair, is an equal footing what we're after. But I think the effect of that would just be mostly negative.
I think the counter to it as well would be if a player like Quentin Grimes can force his way out of Dallas, is there like some recipient? Like, but you look at it, the higher, like not the super high end, but the higher end, like De'Aaron Fox played some role in coming out of Sacramento. It really feels like the Kings just bungled that one. So maybe a bad example, but I don't think you could do this. Like already the way that the aprons are set up, like trades are just become so hard as it is. And look, you can claim, I feel terrible for Mavericks fans, and there's probably only certain franchises that benefit from this, but people love, in part, if you root for the NBA, I would argue that you like, at least on some level, the transactional aspect of it. And this would kneecap that more than the apron stuff already has.
Right.
What's up next?
From Discard Tom, have best of 5 series for the entire playoffs rather than best of 7. So how many, I forget which rounds used to be best of 5. Certainly the first round.
Yeah.
I mean, it does raise the likelihood of upsets because you shrink the sample, and like 2 hot shooting games from a bad team swing a series. Whereas if they do that in a 7-game series, it may not. So this is in favor of chaos, and you have like a chaos Bulls logo on this one. I kind of think I like it because the first round, it's a lot, man. Like it's a lot of games. And I think half the series are like, what are we, the 1-8, the 2-7, like what are we doing? Like these are just perfunctory at this point with 7 games.
Now, my pushback on that would be, should you get rid of the play-in tournament at that point? Because then you are upping the play-in tournament was introduced to, I'm sure, implement more gate revenue, but to up the variance factor. And my whole thing is not that they're at a disadvantage and they should beat them regardless, but it's going to be weird that the Cavs will be one of the last teams to find out who they're facing in the playoffs after being so good during the regular season. So when you already have that in there, now you're going to shorten the series to give them an even not that there's no point then to being the 1 seed, but now you're lowering their mark. Isn't the whole point we want the regular season to matter? And it feels like to have the play-in tournament on top of best of 5 throughout the entire thing, it just devalues the regular season even more at a time when people already think, well, I disagree, but everyone's entitled to their opinion, when they already feel like the regular season doesn't matter. So now we're going to dilute it even further.
That's a great point. It would devalue the regular season especially for the best teams, which is like, do we want that? I think the trade-off of who doesn't love an upset? Like who doesn't, I think you're probably right that like, as we've talked it through, it would be a net negative, but I think it's a possibility that like, if what casual is such a loaded word, but if with a broader NBA watching fan base wants is like excitement, I think this makes the first round way more exciting. And if that's really when people tune in anyway, maybe the net gain is there. I don't know. It's interesting.
I think it definitely makes it more entertaining. I just don't know if it's fair. It's definitely not fair to like the upper echelon teams, but then my bigger concern would be, like I just outlined with the regular season, I think at least the conference finals and the NBA finals should be best of 7. Like those should
too. I think one of the best parts about the NBA in comparison to other sports, like baseball in particular, is that like the best team usually wins the championship. You know what I mean? It's not like where in baseball you get a hot road, who knows? The samples are so tiny that like anything seems to be able to happen in baseball. I don't think the best team always wins the World Series. I feel like the best team pretty much always wins the NBA finals, and this would make that less likely.
Maybe you could counter that by saying, is the NBA more than baseball, more than football, with I guess the exception of the quarterback position? Like one injury can change everything. Yeah. And so now there's the variance of that plus the play-in tournament, and now you're adding this into the fold. Is that too much variance? I just think it would be more entertaining. Like it's because you're less likely to get the outcome right, or the better team, quote unquote, the better team is less likely to win. That's more compelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next one comes from Candice Pedreza. I love what Unrivaled does. But I like that the focus, I don't know if is like the right word. A lot of focus on free throws. I appreciate it. I love what Unrivaled does with free throws that count for 2 points or 3 points, depending on where the shot attempt came, if it was a shooting foul. I think it'd be nice for the NBA to implement something similar to both cut down on time spent at the line and to add drama to free throws. What do you think about this one from Candace?
I mean, as an avowed, let's cut down the free throw lag times, I think I'm in. It would make the game faster. It would like raise the stakes of every free throw to like I mean, a free throw worth 3 points, like that's something. The downside is I don't see it. Like I guess like you lose. So here, practically speaking, you lose the substitution after the first free throw that you have now. If you're shooting 2, you have to figure out how to provide a substitution opportunity, which maybe just happens after the make.
What if it's a miss?
If it's a miss, you got to keep playing. You just lose it. Yeah, because like the whole point of this would be to speed the game up, so you couldn't just add a stoppage for a sub. What's the downside?
So I actually really like this one. I want to make this clear. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. We're talking about how it does feel like the one thing I think I can agree is that the NBA feels set up for offenses to thrive. And this, for the most part, feels like even more of an advantage for offenses because it's if defense makes a mistake, it's not, okay, you foul, Devin Booker on a 3-pointer. He has to make all 3 foul shots. I can't say 3 free throws. Can you?
You just did it.
Well, there you go. Like he has to make all 3 of those versus 1. So again, from an entertainment perspective, in terms of speeding up the game and adding leverage to the free throws, I love it. I just wonder if now you're penalizing defenses even further.
I don't know. It's tough. Like
would you have to look at, because what is the foul like percentage? Like if you go by shot, like of what's the foul shot, like your free throw percentage on the first shot, the second shot, and then a third shot.
Yeah, right. It probably goes up between the first, like oh man, I've read some about this where like the second free throw is made more frequently than the first. I think that's true. So I don't know. You're just increasing variance then really, because that first shot is going to be less likely to go in and now it counts for double or triple.
Could you imagine that at the end of the game?
Oh, no, that's what I mean. Like how loaded you get fouled shooting a 3 at the end of a game and you're down 2, you have 1 shot, you're either going to win or lose the game. It's just like, I don't know. That's kind of, I mean, shooting 3 free throws in an end of game situation is like, if it's close, is tense anyway, but 1 is just like, I think the adrenaline spike would be higher with just 1.
Actually, the adrenaline spike might be higher, but isn't there like a more sustained adrenaline rush if it's 3? Because let's say you miss the first or the second one, then it's, well, what do they do on the third one now? Then it's just over after that 1 shot attempt.
But imagine the volume and the like palpable resignation in the when they miss the 1 shot for 3. The crowd reaction would be like amplified.
I love this idea, I think.
Yeah,
but
this is my favorite so far. It's simple. It gets the job done.
What do we have next?
All right, from David, offensive 3-second violation in the corner. Oh, here we go. So you can still take corner 3s, but you cannot camp out in the corners. Now, this is interesting. I have never heard this idea. Have you?
No, I was like, I mean, I don't know what PJ Tucker's career arc would look like if this was, in play, but
this is fascinating. I
was trying to think of the way you approached it with the free throw idea. I was trying to think of the downside here, and I don't know if this is a stretch, but like, okay, so they have to move. Is this just so they're going to vacate inside the arc? Is it like they just have to come touch and then jump back? Does it compromise spacing at all? Does it just not have a material difference? I think it definitely adds a mental layer to what players have to think about for sure.
Right. Because you see guys 2.9 in the lane all the time and just step in, step out. And you can't just as a center stand in the restricted area and just wait for a pass all day. Yeah, you're right. Like, I wonder, we need a little bit more on the, like, what are the specifics of how you like refresh the 3 seconds? Like, do you need to like leave a certain amount of space, or can you just like tiptoe inside and then tiptoe back? But like, I'm way more open to something like this than getting rid of the corner 3 or just like, because I mean, this promotes more movement. Good. We like that. It promotes like, I don't know, like more advanced, like strategic thinking, like because you've got a timeout. One possible drawback is like now you got a ref additionally having to pay attention to
add another official.
Yeah, add 2 more. You need 1 in each corner now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like this infinitely more than a lot of the other ones.
This just created jobs. I'm all for it.
Right. You're creating jobs out here. It's really interesting. I would like to see what it would look like, more so than the getting rid of the lines or anything like that.
That was a really good one, David. Shout out to you. I like that one. Okay, this one's from Paul. I remember putting this one in. Who's the player that's pictured here, Grant? I want to
This
see
is that my guy, Lindy Waters?
it is. And this is why it matters, because Lindy Waters ranks, I think, second in average shot distance.
Oh,
Like how far out it is. But every team gets to determine where the 3-point line is on its home court within defined limits, or not have one at all. Decision must be final before start of preseason and can't be changed till the next year.
Oh, wow. So this is
So
like
immediately, this is just sort of like one decision can feel like it might fuck up your entire year.
right.
So I don't necessarily love it when there's all like between trades and free agency or draft, like you could do enough of that. But just sort of the juxtaposition between, well, what team, like this could impact how you build your team.
Totally. Well, it's like the parallel, we citing a lot of baseball, but it's like every ballpark has different dimensions, and you don't usually see teams tailor it to like a specific player or players, because it's like, we're going to move an entire wall because we got this one right-handed hitter with power, so let's bring in the left field. Like this, though, so what I thought it was going to be like game to game, you could tweak it, which would be like insane. Just to like depend on the opponent.
Do you think the Magic would try and move theirs into the foul line?
The Magic would get rid of it. I feel like it's just we're playing twos only, and they'd be great. They'd be so good. Who would be the best team in the league if you couldn't shoot threes? If there were no 3-point line?
I think it'd be
why
Denver.
is it still the Thunder?
You're right. It's probably still the Thunder, just because the transition opportunities in the defense. Who's the second best? That might be more compelling.
Maybe Denver, just because
I think it's Denver. Yeah.
just gets to be near the basket all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is another fascinating one. I think teams would be so scared of having to make the decision in preseason and live with it all year that it would like everyone would just choose the standard.
Right. And could you imagine like having to adjust like game by game from like, do you think that could worsen the product? Because it's not like these teams have a ton of time in between games as it is, and we're worried about, like, it just feels like we could have some stinkers, especially early on, but this is so radical and novel that I kind of like it.
It would make like stat comparisons by era and like, I mean, even year to year really weird, because there'd be like, it's Detroit, Milwaukee tonight. There'll be no line, or there'll be a 40-foot line, or it's like you'd go into the game being like, oh, it's going to be this type of game. And it would be like completely different from another type of game in the same league, in the same sport, potentially involving the same two teams. Just so it'd be like, it would just be, the sport would be like fundamentally different night to night, which, like, I don't know, maybe there's some appeal to that, but it makes like apples to apples comparisons really strange.
And I think, look, some of the arguments too is just like, maybe people don't have an actual problem with the prevalence of 3-pointers, but they hate how easily big leads are erased.
Mm-hmm.
And this would like give you a counter that if you don't have a 3-point line, like you get out to a big lead, it's curtains.
Yeah, grinding it out. Yeah, interesting. All right, this is from Aaron Woodard. Use real-time data to, and we have Fizdale. I get it, Dan. Data. Use real-time data to immediately determine the distance from the basket any shooter is. A 0-foot shot is worth 2. A 25-foot shot is worth 3, and every 1 foot in between is worth an additional 0.04 points. Shout out to crunching the numbers here. I assume the 0.04 is arrived at like for a purpose. It makes it so every shot up to 25 feet is approximately equally efficient. This would allow teams to significantly diversify their offensive systems without needing to worry so much about layups and threes. Okay, I got to think about this for a second.
Now, can I do the surface level rebuke to it? This feels unfair. Like, so you're going to need, like, there's going to have, like, fans aren't going to know the score when a shot, like, it's just not math they're going to be able to process. You have machines calculating it, so it's automated. I get it. But, like, isn't there something to knowing, like, because you don't know, you've watched the broadcast where they have the shot distance when they take it off.
Yeah.
But you're not immediately going to know, like, no, that shot is worth 3.12 points. And so this is what, like, and what would the final scores of these games be?
You'd have some decimals in there, that's for sure. So I'm trying to decide. So what this fixes, quote unquote, is the problem that 2 inches or however wide the line is the difference between a 3 and a 2. So that makes it so that like 2s that are close to the 3 are stupid shots, and then 2s close to the rim are great. So yeah, you get rid of the layups and 3s like spread, but then I'm trying to does this then make it so long twos? You know what? This would make it so long twos are like better shots than they are. So I think if that's a problem in your mind as far as like how offense is played, this addresses that. I think just the like ability to follow it, which you pointed out, might be like the killer of it though.
I would like to see this implemented in the G League just to know what the viewer experience would be.
Yeah.
Forget stylistically for sure, but just like seeing the score like that. But I don't think that I could. This might be my old person yells at clouds moment where it's I don't know if I like final score of 109.36. Like so I don't know if I could ever get used to that.
The more I think about it though, the more it would encourage like shot diversity. Because it does make it so it doesn't like the either or of the three or layup is like eased enough to where a 17-foot shot, it's like, all right, that's 2.2 points. That's better than a layup. So if you can make that at this percentage, it's, I think probably you're still going to hunt layups and threes. It might just like, it might not be as extreme. And like, maybe I like that too. I like that better than moving the lines around again. Like, I think that's a decent suggestion.
I will say, I do like the issue or quality advantage this is trying to create. I definitely appreciate that. Dog from Sanobe, coaches get to keep their challenges until one is unsuccessful. Tom Thibodeau faves this. He's won like 85% of his challenges or whatever this year.
I love the possibility of a coach just being on an incredible heater. And it's just like, he's going for his 8th in a row. That'll be a single game record. And he just flex after getting it. I think I don't have a problem with this. I think like, if you get it right, just keep it up, keep going. Like it slows the game down and we've been against that, but like, I don't know.
Well, that's where again, I don't want them to have fewer referees. Like, just increase the number of people working remotely and like just be like, nope, this is the call. Like, it could be done quicker. It feels like.
Right. Yeah. I'm in. I'm on board.
I like this one. What do we have next?
All right. No more jump balls. Not exciting and slow. Just change of possession. That's from Bill. Eliminate it or allow any player to take it. For Pete Rudkin. So we're hitting jump balls now. The possession arrow, like in college and like youth levels, is kind of exciting because, like, oh my God, if we tie up the offense right now, we get the ball, as opposed to like if it's a guard, it's just the jump ball is a coin flip. Maybe it depends on who's involved, I guess. It does feel like, I don't know. I think I might be into this. I think it's more dramatic if the possession arrow comes back and you're not doing jump balls. Plus, like, how many, like, what referees would you say are like always like, oh, it's straight up and down every time? There's always like a weird amount of variance that makes me uncomfortable in the tosses. So let's cut that out too.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Is it just the possession arrow? Isn't that like a weird, like to have it this level?
Yeah, it is. But every other level has it. So like, I don't know. Like maybe they got it right.
I like the second one where it's allow any player to take it. Then.
If
that or
get big guys
really fuck
back
shit up, and the smallest players on the court have to.
Yeah, now we're talking.
And shouldn't that? No, go with me on this. There's actually a reason for it. Those players are probably they're obviously not as tall, not going to take up as much space. They're not as long. So wouldn't it be easier? They're not obstruct. Like you see, kind of the encroachment that happens between like each jump ball. I think that was, and maybe is that another thing? Do we have players just more spread out for them? Where it's like you have designated spots where it's like around the jump balls. I think I would prefer something more like that.
I'm still in favor of getting rid of jump balls, and I'll tie it back to you're going to knock 30 seconds off of game time every time there's a jump ball, and you just go possession arrow, you got it. And now we're not going to all line up. We're not going to all fight and reposition, and we're not going to toss 3 times. Like, I think, that doesn't feel like there's a glut of jump balls every game, but there's a couple.
Could you theoretically with the possession arrow be punishing like the defense that is forcing the jump balls, or do you view it as they get a chance to get set again if they're not getting the ball back?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it does incorporates like a little bit of luck, I guess, because like just depending on who's got it, the payoff of a jump ball is like wildly, the swings are crazy. It's like you either get the ball or you don't. But like, I don't know. I think the time element of it is kind of pushing me even further in favor of getting rid of jump balls.
Now, how do you determine? But you're keeping opening tips, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll just once. We're limited to 1 jump ball per game.
Next up, we have a longer one here from Regs. while maintaining possession, the first basket attempted and scored that's the direct result of a steal, block, or forced turnover is supercharged. We need like an NBA Jam voice there or something. The basket would be worth 4 points, regardless if it's a 2 or a 3-point attempt. So if a team gets a steal that leads to a breakaway dunk, that's worth 4 points. If the first attempt is missed, the shot clock runs out or the ball turned over, the supercharge ends for that team. If the player is fouled on the shot attempt for the free throws are worth 2 points each. The additional points can be recorded to the team rather than the player, so it doesn't mess with historical scoring stats.
Oh, interesting.
Do you know what this made me think of? And I had to look up the names. I didn't remember it. Jock Jam for MTV. And the only reason it made me think of it is, do you remember it had like 3 hoops on top of each other and you could try to make it all 3? I remember Gary Payton was balling in one.
Well, there was like a 20-point shot or something. Yeah. There were like spots on the floor. Okay, so the first basket scored. Like when is I'm having trouble understanding like when the supercharge is allowed. Like, is it the first turnover to breakaway that you get? Or
yes,
like, you know what I mean? Like
that was my read of this.
So this happens once a game. Is that what it is?
Maybe it resets each quarter.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot happening here. It would incentivize trying to get steals and running out in transition, which is fun, but teams already kind of try that as much as they can because those are the highest EV points there are. So I don't know. If I'll get on board if somehow on the broadcast we can like animate the players that have the supercharge and make it look like they're on fire or something. Like I think that would be cool.
There's like a turbo button or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Make it just look like NBA Jam if that's at all possible. I think that would get me on board.
Do you think it would be if you're so it's only on let me read this again. So it's only on the result of a steal, block, or forced turnover. I do wonder, like, it might change the mindset of how teams are operating after those, was like in terms of who they're trying to get the ball to. Like, would you pause for a second? Like, couldn't in theory decrease breakaways a little bit to where if you were like, no, we need to get the ball to player X now more than ever because this possession is supercharged.
Yeah, or it's just like we're on a breakaway. This layup is worth 4, but like you're gonna try to make the layup. I don't know. I don't know if it changes that much.
There should be, be another version of this. Just came to me. It might be a terrible idea. There should be, how there's the money ball and the 3-point contest. There should be like pick an arbitrary number, like it's 5 or 10, and teams can place like these stickers on the floor, and it's like for the entire game, those shots are worth X amount more points. Like it's 3 or 4 points, and then once you use it, you lose it. So do you save it until the end of the game when you might need it?
Yeah, you definitely would save it. That would have to be the strategy, I think.
That or you just get out to such a big lead.
Right.
Let me just make all these, like if you have the Celtics, they'll put all 10 of them behind the arc, I'd assume.
Yeah. Plus, if you, as a defense, you would just defend those spots like more attentively because you can't let shots go up from the
yeah, but there's a 3-second rule on those spots.
Yeah, we need 17 more refs to police this.
What do we have next?
All right. This is from Mavs Muse. Players can touch the ball on the way down or on the rim like FIBA. This is from Chance. Bring in FIBA goaltending rules. Once the ball touches the rim, it becomes fair game. Man, this would be like, things would look very different. And if you want to bring big guys back, I think this helps probably.
And if you don't like the high scoring nature, then this definitely helps.
Yeah, right. If you can get the ball on the way down, like, does that, you can block everything as a defense?
This would increase like one of the like Michael Jordan type of plays that are mythologized as him just pinning the ball against the backboard. I think it would increase the amount of times we see that, and that actually is really cool.
Yeah, and so I really, then this isn't stated, but like, so getting the ball to the backboard first as an offensive player does not insulate you from, that's not goaltending if that gets swatted away either, because that's technically like on the way down, I guess.
Get rid of goaltending? Is that
like, you would have peak DeAndre Jordan's has gotten a couple mentions here, but this is for a good reason this time. Like peak DeAndre Jordan would just stand under the basket and block threes, right? Like he would just go up and get them and they were on the way down, and that's not goaltending. We can't have this. This would not work.
I'd like to see it just to see what
There's
that would look like.
Perimeter shooting. You just, I guess the 3 seconds thing, but like you would just station like what Wemby becomes, you can't score on the Spurs now because he just stands on the block and he goes and blocks every jump shot on the way down.
So on the way down is fine, but rim or backboard after it touches it, you should be allowed to do something. No,
If it's the FIBA rule, because the on the way down thing is not a FIBA rule, but like, yeah, if it's on the rim, it's like a live ball. That makes things pretty interesting. I could get behind that, not the on the way down.
Well, I don't know. It would increase the value of these players who take like these moon ball shots, though, right? Because those would be harder.
No way, you would still block those. You don't think Wemby could stand under the basket, jump up with one hand, and just like he's like, I've got my hand flat, like we're about to shoot it, and just tip it out.
That's Wemby. I'm talking
but like
Jokic isn't going to do that as a like Sabonis going to do so it'd be like maybe it would change the dynamics of when you were younger and you were being taught to shoot. One of like my coaches used to say aim for the back of the front of the rim. Sure. And now maybe that changes to aim for the front of the back of the rim or something. Like, I
just don't see a scenario where every team doesn't have like 3 guys without even having to hunt them down that are big enough at like Quentin Post on the Warriors, suddenly a defensive monster because he could just stand under the basket and tip balls out that are about to go in.
I wonder what the frequency of that would be, but even if it was pretty high frequency, it would kind of force more of a reversion to emphasis on 2-pointers.
Oh my God, like suddenly the dunk is the only safe shot. That's the only shot that can't be goaltended. This would be chaos. We can't have this.
I am for the FIBA rule, and I wonder why the NBA doesn't allow that. Is there like, what's the reasoning?
I don't know. Probably because I don't know. It's more exciting because you got guys going after the live ball on the rim more.
Okay, this one comes from Theodore Toronto. Add a CFL-style crossover rule in the play-in. If the 10th place team in the West has more points than the 10th place team in the East or vice versa, but come on, they get that spot.
So how I wish I was more familiar with the CFL-style crossover being referenced here. So what does that mean? Let's take the crying Bulls thing that we have here. So the Bulls win.
If the 10th place team in the West scored more points this season than the 10th place team, like you have the ability to shift conferences.
Yeah. So some kind of tiebreaker. It could be just record, honestly, right? It wouldn't need to be,
or like something fun, like record against teams above 500 or something. I don't know.
So what this accomplishes is it incentivizes teams in the play-in range, because like sometimes the play-in gets pretty well stratified and like you're not going to move up or down in your conference very much. Like over the last 2 weeks, it would give them like, oh, but that team in the West, we might be able to overtake them and then snake that spot. And I think I don't hate it. I think because who even cares about the play-in teams anyway? Like preserving conference integrity, just like let them. Everybody's going to jump to the East, number one, probably. Although maybe not this year. I like it. I'm in.
I'm in for this one too. What do we have next?
All right. From DT Savage, stay with a team 10 years and you can take some of your salary as an equity stake in the team, vesting on retirement that does not count against the cap. I wholeheartedly agree with this because the players on my favorite team are old and I would like them to not be so expensive. That's
now
it benefits the Warriors more than any other team.
Now, my thing would be, doesn't this put maybe undue pressure on the player to say that they want a vested ownership stake in the team, and that if they don't take it, they're looked at as sort of like some villain by proxy? Because the appeal of this right now is understandable, but are we in like a sports franchise valuation bubble? They can't continue to just go up and up and up like this, right?
Yeah, that's true. And you'd want them. Yeah, you would want the equity decision to be like the obviously correct one for the player. It's like, I will make more money doing this, which probably you still would because you got a piece of it forever. Yeah, that would be a sticking point. I'm still I'm in. I think it benefits the Warriors. How do you feel about
this one to where it's, let's use Jaren Jackson Jr. as an example. Let's say he qualifies for All NBA Defensive Player of the Year and gets in one or both of them. You have a super max, but it doesn't count against the salary cap for that much. It still counts as, let's say instead of 35% of the max, it would count as 30%, or if it's 30 versus like, what about that type of a break? And I feel a little more
like that does feel like it should be implemented, because you are there's the weird thing of like, yeah, as a team, you're really hoping your player plays well enough to get the super max, because obviously that means he's awesome. But then at the same time, like part of you might be rooting against it, or like, oh boy, I hope he doesn't qualify.
With Tyrese Maxey last year with the Sixers, where it was like, it was cool to see what he was doing, but you knew their fans were kind of rooting for him not to make All NBA so that they could have the offseason bonanza that they did.
Yep, that cleans that up. Your suggestion, because it's like everybody's happy. The player gets the 35%. It doesn't hurt the team. You know, as much as it would. I like that.
Let's see what we have next. Okay. Actually, I think I like this one. This one comes from Clark Matthews. I would like to see fouls to break up alley-oops be free throws. As it stands, the defender is encouraged to foul because it will be a side out, even if the catching player still gets the ball after the foul, instead of allowing a really fun play.
Yeah, I think what's hard is like it's already hard because you do see free throws awarded on alley-oop attempt finishes if it becomes like a shooting motion, like if they're actually about to dunk it down. I think those are called fouls, right? But it's like if you catch them in the air earlier before, like, first of all, stop fouling guys that are in the air. Like let's get rid of that. If you're standing on the ground, as who is that? Who's that? Bradley Beal again? That's fouling Edwards there.
Yeah,
man, get out of here. I'm okay with that. I think because it's like, one, it's basically a shooting foul, and two, it's like dangerous. So let's disincentivize it as much as possible.
This done in like kind of conjunction with the charge rules, where it just feels like it would make the game safer. Like I would say extending the charge circle makes the most sense. It feels like it would make the game safer for players like that are going airborne.
Yeah, which we want. Like that everyone agrees, like it's way cooler to watch a game where guys are flying through the air than not.
This next one, Grant.
Oh, how'd you do that? We got Bronny and LeBron synced up flopping. Actually call text for flops again from Nitseed. Yes, please. Yeah, it's kind of coming back. Doesn't it feel like
happened?
That?
They just like, it was a point of emphasis, and it's just, and I think honestly, you know what you do is that there should be retroactive fines for flopping, even if they're not called, and they should be way more punitive as a percentage of your salary than they actually are.
Aren't there supposed to be fines still? Like
it's like an unwritten, like I guess they feel like they curtailed it enough to where it's not an issue. But I would say, do you think that flopping though has become like worse for offensive players than defensive players at this point?
Yeah, because the rules are over the last several years have become such that like it just favors the offense. So contact still is like, wow, it's going to be against the defensive player. Like, who was it? I think it was Zaire Williams against Golden State last night. Like, kind of ran into a backcourt screen and just like both arms flail. Like, yes, he got hit, but like the accentuation, I don't know how you police that, but like there's some line of like what's accentuation and what's a flop. Like, we need to, like, aggressive accentuation is close. Like, we got to get the like, call baiting, like fake arm flailing thing out. So I think that, first of all, it is a rule now. So just like enforce it.
I can't add anything to that. I like it. Nice that LeBron and Bronny got to have that father-son moment of the dual flop, though. This next one comes from Dante from the 404. Post-game interviews for referees that lead assistant coaches, but not head coaches or players, get to attend. Review shot clock of 30 seconds. If there is no conclusion by then, the call on the floor stands. I like that second one. That's like, so just implement, there's a time limit, just like you want a time limit on free throws. There's a time limit on the reviews, the post-game interviews for referees. So right now they already have like the pool reporters get to speak to the referees.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting. It feels like it could be pretty contentious if you now had coaches inserted into the equation. However, I am game if those interviews are televised and they're done on the sidelines and we get to watch them.
Oh man. I feel like I want to come, uncomfortably want to come down on the side of referees and be like, that job's hard. They're going to miss calls. I actually don't want to hear from them after the game in any capacity. Like, we all just can acknowledge that they're going to mess up sometimes. I don't know. What do the assistant coaches have to do with this? I'm having a hard time parsing that part.
I think head coaches, like, I mean, could you imagine friggin', I don't know, Michael Malone or Rick Carlisle, like, interview a referee?
The lead assistant gets to attend this review.
Oh, so you're basically let lead assistants into the pool reporting. Well, I'd rather see the assistants interview the referees, actually. That's what I thought that said initially.
I don't know what's happening here. Let's move on. From Nutter, Jordan Poole. Introduce relegations. Why does Jordan Poole have to be involved in this? Tanking would be less of an issue if teams face the possibility of dropping out of the league. It'll never happen, but it'd be amazing. I mean, you would solve tanking. Like, that, full stop. That would help. Relegation has always seemed so harsh to me. But it happens in other sports.
So in this case,
well, you just have a you cut the league in half more, but then you and also do expansion. So now there's 60 teams and 30 of them are.
Is it so you do expansion, but like 2 of the teams start out in the G League and have to earn their way to? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it's tough. Like the Premier League is like wildly popular. I don't know if other international soccer leagues have relegation. It's hard having not grown up with like that as a sports mainstay to imagine like what would happen if your favorite NBA team was not in the NBA year to year like that. Wouldn't that be? I just don't know how that would feel.
How would you build? Would you build or squander loyalty by doing something like that?
Well, I mean, I don't know because like theoretically, if you get relegated, odds are you're going to be at the top of the league you just went down to. So you might like kick ass for a season and fans would like that. And then, hey, we get to go back up. That's fun. That's probably more fun than being in NBA purgatory, right? Like you get dumped down, but then you get to climb back up and you have this goal to achieve. I don't know. Like maybe that's why it like works in every other sport in every other country.
I guess I would just struggle to see what to say. Like you would really, so cut the league in half just feels that's
Yeah,
not
I don't know
gonna
how the logistics are tricky. You just seems like you need more teams.
I do. The idea of the stakes behind it, though, would
Oh.
be like, what about sort of something like if you're this X bad, if you win fewer than X percentage of your game over a 5-year span, like the owner should be forced to sell or something at that point. This is our final one, I believe. So get really sad. It comes from P. Dawkins. Not really a rule change, but the MVP debate is so toxic and ridiculous now that I would revive and refine the IBM Award. It used a computer formula to measure a player's statistical contribution to their team. Do you recall this award? Because I did not. I had to Google it. So here's a quick recap of it. The IBM Award was an award given out to NBA players from 1984 to 2002. The award was sponsored and calculated by technology company IBM and was determined by a computer formula which measured a player's statistical contribution to his team. The player with the best contribution to his team in the league received the award. The first recipient was Magic Johnson of the Los Angeles Lakers, and the final recipient was Tim Duncan of the San Antonio Spurs. With the caveat that I'm old, but not old enough to remember this. I feel like I should remember Tim Duncan having won the IBM Award, and the fact that I don't might say all that like needs to be said on it.
I have no recollection of that award, and I was paying attention to the NBA for at least half of the time period you mentioned.
Oh wow, okay.
I mean, I really would like to know more names because, like, 2 for 2. If Magic Johnson in '84 and Tim Duncan in '02 got it, pretty solid. But I wonder.
So do you want to know the winners?
Well, sure.
So Magic Johnson won the first, and then this is in 1985, Michael Jordan. Okay. Then Charles Barkley won it in 86, 87, and 88. Michael Jordan won it in 89. David Robinson won it in 90, 91. 92 was Dennis Rodman.
Okay.
93 was Hakeem. 94, 95, and 96 was David Robinson again. Grant Hill won it in 97. Karl Malone won it in 98. Dikembe Mutombo won it in 99. Shaq won it in 2000 and 2001, and then Tim Duncan won it in 2002.
I mean, it's not far off from Hughes, pretty close to the MVP stuff. The Mutombo, and I mean, who knows? Maybe Mutombo was the MVP. You know what I mean? I think we sort of, if you're a halfway conscientious MVP voter, you're paying attention to several catch-all metrics as it is now. So, like, I guess you do remove the debate by just letting the computer decide, but I don't find the debate to be toxic enough that that's an issue.
Well, I disagree with you with it not being toxic enough, but shout out to David Robinson, the IBM Award GOAT, apparently, for winning like half a dozen of them. I would say, when you look back, okay, the debates, I really do think the tenor of them just sucks at this point, for the most part. But especially when you get to like Shea versus Jokic, it just creates this contention. It's like, and people get hostile, they're derisive. But if you go back through the list of MVPs, how many times do you think that there have been an egregious pick for MVP?
That's the thing. Like, really, really rarely. Like, what do people point to? Like the Derrick Rose one, people highlight all the time as like, I don't know about. I think there's another.
The Russell Westbrook one gets
Westbrook
quite a bit.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, even those are like he averaged a triple double, and Derrick Rose was the best player on a team that was first in the conference. Like, you know what I mean? Like, even those might not be egregious. So I don't think you get MVP like objectively wrong almost ever.
Do you think there could be something done and I don't know if it's implementing a set of criteria that's not necessarily, I mean, they have the games played threshold, but like to make the award less interpretational, but not too formulaic, that would then force people to evaluate it within sort of the same prism, or no, there's just nothing that can be done.
I think we are where we need to be on the MVP award, which is if you're like, it's okay if you have a differing opinion. Like, I think as long as it's like reasonably well informed, and it's like the games limit thing, like how we always talk about, like, just let people decide whether 64 games of this is worth more than 71 games of that. Like, everyone's using good numbers now. I mean, hopefully, and everybody's watching games. Like, I don't have a problem with the MVP debate being contentious. To your point, it sucks that like you have to denigrate like the guy you don't think should win it, as opposed to just say like, they're both awesome. I hope this guy wins it, but I get it if the other guy does, which is kind of where I'm at this season, by the way. Same with Embiid and Jokic. I thought Jokic should have won it a couple of years ago, but like, how are you going to deny like Embiid was not good? Like, what are we saying?
I don't know how you're going to look at if Shea or Jokic wins it. I mean, Shea or Jokic won't win it. I don't know how you look at the winner and say they didn't deserve it. And so, like, it should have been so and so by a landslide.
Yeah. I think we're good. I think we can handle a little disagreement.
So you don't think, and I guess just the results, but maybe I don't know if this would impact at least the discourse around it. Maybe it wouldn't matter. But I've seen some people, I think, I'll say many of whom, or a bulk of which, probably think that they should be on said panel, but have thought about, let's shrink the voter pool when it comes to MVP or these awards in general, so that it's not. I think specifically some people want to excommunicate, regional people from the process and have it be more national media members. And then my concern with that is if you wanted to, because in theory, if you're picking a league-wide award, it should be someone who's trying to keep a pulse on all 30 teams as much as possible. At the same time, when you look at some of the quote-unquote national media members that have it, it might lend itself to worse
for results. Sure. Yeah, I don't know how you solve that, because the local guys are going to be biased all the time. And they may not vote that way, but they will have to like overcome that bias, I think, to be objective. And then a lot of the national guys just like aren't paying attention. So that's just how it is. So I don't know what I think about the size of the voting body. I think if you dumped out all of the local guys, you might just really have like an increased instance of like groupthink, It's because I think the local guys are the ones that provide like local people are the ones that provide like more context or more nuance, or just like a boots on the ground kind of feel, which I think is valuable if you're trying to break close ties. Like all that information helps.
I also don't think it matters for year-end awards as much as like the broader scope ones, where it's when it comes down to all NBA, is that where you might be more susceptible to egregious results, because the pool is extended so much, where it's
maybe
when it's MVP, it's always like 3 players or fewer that it comes down to for real.
Yeah, that's true.
The goal was to get through as many as we could in 2 hours, and we did we held to that. Grant, how are you feeling after this?
I feel like, what was your favorite rule? Just
the free throw one from Candace Pedraza, like, let's make them one shot worth 2 points or 3 points.
Yeah.
I think that in retrospect, that was my favorite one.
Yeah. I think I was most intrigued by the 3 seconds in the corner, but I don't know if I could ever get
didn't that one feel like perhaps the most realistic one?
Well, it was just, I liked it because I'd never heard it. I think we've heard some version of all of these, and I was like, oh, hadn't thought of that. That's interesting. Yeah, thanks everybody for all your submissions. If we didn't get to yours, it probably overlapped with one that we did get to, hopefully, so you don't feel shortchanged there. This was really good, really interesting. We solved the NBA, I think, collectively is the takeaway.
We did it, everybody. Shout out to us.
So everybody, you're welcome. If you enjoyed this, remember, rate, review, subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, rate highly, still review, subscribe, do all that stuff wherever you're getting your podcast. Subscribe on our YouTube channel. Hopefully you were watching this there, so you got to see all of Dan's painstakingly made graphics, which I appreciate, and you should also appreciate.
You did. You shouted out, I think the bare minimum that I said it'd be worth it was 3, and you
good.
Giggle at 3. So
I hit the quota. I'm glad. I didn't want to let you down. What else? Join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. That's where we got a lot of these suggestions from. Good place to reach us. Good place to interact with a lot of people that provided these suggestions. That's going to do it. Shouts, Franklin Lakina. Apologies, Jared Allen.